The Mayor and Council of Princeton, New Jersey. It is July 24th, 2023. Can we have the meeting statement, please?
Sure. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, including the time, date, and location of the meeting. In addition, the agenda and all related materials were posted electronically and made available to the public on Princeton's meeting portal in advance of the meeting.
Thank you. Leticia?
Sure. We gather today on the land of the Lenni Lenape. As members of the Princeton community, we aspire to show appreciation, respect, and concern for all peoples and our environment. We honor the Lenape and other indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters, the elders who lived here before, the indigenous today, and the generations to come.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Here.
Ms. Niedergang?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Sachs?
Here.
Ms. Fraga?
Here.
Mr. Newland?
Here.
Mayor Frida?
Here. All right, if you'd like to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, one quick note on the agenda. Under resolutions, the first item, number 1, which is Resolution 23-242, we're going to take off the agenda. There's other paperwork that needs to be done prior to us being able to vote on that, so we will not be able to do that tonight. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve, if someone would like to move those. David, thank you. And Eve's got the second. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Which resolution did you say you were taking off?
It's,
Oh.
sorry, so just so you can hear what they're saying, Eve asked what resolution was removed. There was a resolution about towing fees, but until the ordinance is put in place, we can't do the resolution. So since the ordinance hasn't been done, depending which version of the agenda you're looking at, either is or wasn't on there, but if it is on your version, it no longer will be. Thank you. Okay. Announcements, reports by council folks. Leticia.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have a couple of announcements and reports. On behalf of the Princeton Human Services Department, they are seeking donors for its 14th annual backpack and school supplies drive. The drive benefits Princeton children who are low income and in need of school supplies and new backpacks. For the past 13 years, the Princeton Human Services Commission, Princeton University, municipal employees, local businesses, organizations, and residents have donated book bags and school supplies that have benefited over 200 children, and this is each year they serve 200 children. The items are distributed to children from low-income families who attend the Princeton Public Schools and are entering kindergarten through 6th grade. Anyone interested in participating in this year's drive may drop off donations at the Princeton Human Services office on weekdays from 9 to 5. The office is located at 1 Monument Drive. The deadline for donations is Friday, August 4th. And for families who are interested in applying to receive the backpacks and school supplies, the applications are being accepted at their office, and the deadline to apply to receive a backpack and supplies is Friday, August 4th. The other is more of a combination announcement report. So over the years, my colleagues and I have heard from several members of our community, and I would include the late Daniel Harris, Bob Durkee, as well as members from Not in Our Town, who have questioned why the Welcome to Princeton signage included the wording settled in 1683, implying that the year was the first and only time that people inhabited this land. Earlier this year, the governing body referred the question to the Civil Rights Commission and asked for recommendations on what, if any, changes could be made. Following the Civil Rights Commission's presentation to Council on April 10th, the consensus was that the first step would be to remove the wording on the signage, and this would be followed by a long-term approach that could include signage at more accessible locations that were pedestrian-friendly and that would direct individuals to a municipal webpage so that residents can learn more about Princeton's history. And in case others have not noticed, the wording on the signs has changed as of this past Friday. Thanks, Deanna Stockton, for following up and for getting it done. The removal of the settled-in wording on the signs is an important first step in recognizing and acknowledging that indigenous people were the original caretakers and stewards of the land long before any settlers arrived. Acknowledging indigenous land does not negate or dismiss the contributions of those who came afterwards. It does not minimize or overshadow the achievements and contributions of individuals, communities, or cultures that have shaped Princeton over time. Instead, this acknowledgement allows us the opportunity to embrace a more complete and inclusive understanding of history that recognizes the important role of indigenous people while also highlighting the diverse narratives and experiences that have shaped our community. By first recognizing the historical significance of indigenous land, we can foster a deeper sense of connectedness, empathy, and cultural appreciation within our communities. At the same time, it's an opportunity to celebrate the resilience, perseverance, and contributions of diverse cultures, recognizing the collective heritage that we all share. It is through unity and collaboration that we can build a more inclusive, equitable, and thriving society for present and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council announcements or reports? Yeah.
I cede my time to our Deputy Administrator, Municipal Engineer, Deanna Stockton, who has a few questions for us.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have 3 reports tonight to give to you regarding waste and recycling in Princeton. 2 will be very short. The other one we'll have some conversation on. The residential waste information packet is supposed to be mailed to all residents this week. It not only contains the fall leaf and branch collection schedule, it also includes additional information on residential trash, recycling, and our upcoming food scrap project. Next update is on August 1st. Staff will be attending the Community Night Out event here at 400 Witherspoon Street. Residents are encouraged to stop by our table to learn more about food scrap recycling, stormwater management, and fats, oils, and grease management in our sewers. We'll also be giving away free trees and shrubs. And the last update for tonight is in regards to the leaf and branch collection. We continue to educate residents to gain compliance regarding the collection schedule and acceptable items. We remind residents that we aim for compliance and not for penalties. And the goal is to make sure that our sidewalks and roadways are safe for all users. So our municipal regulations allow Princeton to correct or abate a violation of the code and render a bill for the services to the resident. The code also allows us to issue a summons to municipal court for noncompliance. So during the first 2 weeks of July, our community compliance officer has been out working with residents to educate them regarding the regulations. She's issued 142 OOPS notices, which it's a document that just shows what the rules are and where you might have misinterpreted or not followed. And so after that 142 OOPS notices were issued, she went back out and issued 40 notices of noncompliance, and this is in keeping with the ordinance, which it identifies what part of the code the residents were not in compliance with, and they had 5 calendar days to correct that. And so after that was done, she went back out, and of the 40 notices given, 9 residents did not comply still. So we went from 142 to 40 down to 9. And so last Friday, DPW went out and collected the piles of material from the roadway, and the next step is for us to render the invoice for the services of collection. We had, like I said, we had 9 piles. The main issues were material placed too close to storm drains or inlets. So again, back to one of those safety issues or a pollution of our streams and waterways. Or they had non-compliant materials out like grass clippings, oversized logs, or dirt and soil. So for the material, our DPW collected it. It took an hour. They had a truck driver, a laborer, equipment operator, loader, and compactor. And so in determining the cost to do this work, we calculated the cost of those services for those employees as well as for the vehicles. The material is disposed of in East Windsor, and they take it as a mixed load, and they have on-site recycling, and that's set at $5.50 a truckload. So when we calculated it, you can calculate it so many ways to get a number, anywhere ranging from $26 to $838, depending on if you charge for the truckload or not charge for the truckload. So what I'm coming tonight to do is to recommend and get your feedback on a fee, but what we've come up with is a fee of $100 as the base fee, and that would account for basically the costs that we've expended on Friday's collection for those 9 piles. It would be a base fee. It's strictly to gain compliance. It's not intended to be punitive. We've gone back and forth because we've heard that landscapers potentially charge $100 for this service. So there's a little concern that maybe residents will say, well, I'm not going to pick it up and move it. I'm not going to call my landscaper in because the town will come by and pick it up for $100. But again, we're trying to get compliance. It's the first year of the program. We do have the tool that if people are not compliant in the future, we can also use the municipal court summons, which requires, it's a mandatory appearance at court. So that's what I come to you tonight to present that fee recommendation and answer any questions or feedback from council on that.
Eve?
Thank you, Deanna, for that. It's very thorough. So is the court summons, I mean, I share your concern that for the same amount of money that it's going to take a landscaper, like why call a landscaper and arrange for it if the town is just going to come along and do that? So I'm a little bit skeptical of just, sticking with that fee. But when you talk about a summons, at what point would that be issued?
So we can issue a summons instead of collecting the material, but because part of the goal is to keep our roads clean and safe for all users, we would rather, have the quick turnaround and the cleaning of the streets than the more punitive summons. But we can do, it's an either or it's an and. So if there's non-payment, we could do a summons. If there's continued non-compliance, we can also do a summons.
Right, so maybe the suggestion of $100 seems good, but if somebody then does not comply a second time, then they get the fee again of $100 and a summons, which hopefully will send a message that you should call your landscaper or do it yourself.
Correct.
I guess that's what, that would be my concern, is that people will just assume that the municipality will take care of it. I just wanted to add, I know this is maybe not the major reason that we're cracking down on this, but that, and you could talk about this a little bit, but the DEP has passed new regulations, and it's really important for us to keep our our storm drains clean and to keep materials off the streets. And the more of the cycle of the year that those materials are out there, the more that pollutants are washing into our waterways. So it's not just, somebody said to me today, I would rather have Witherspoon Street be less nice and have you collect leaves and brush more frequently. So I just want to stress that it's not purely a financial decision to limit these pickups. It's also an attempt to preserve the quality of our waterways. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yep. No, thank you for bringing that up. It is very imperative for Princeton to increase our staffing in terms of stormwater management. Like you mentioned, we have new regulations that will be really require staff from DPW to implement. It's a lot more documenting and cleaning of our stormwater management system. We have over 3,000 inlets in town. And actually in the next 6 months, we will have our DPW staff out on site with tablets and GIS applications to document all of our inlets. They'll be opening grates, they'll be going in and getting us a baseline condition for all of the inlets, so that in subsequent years, we still have to do inspections and cleaning, but at least we will have a baseline document as to the condition of what we've got. And then within the next, I think, 3 to 5 years, any storm drain grates that are non-compliant have to be replaced as well. So there's a lot of work that will be necessary that will take our staff away from being able to drive around town all summer long, or multiple times in spring and fall outside of the normal schedule time. And I will note too, just on the size of the piles, all of the piles were under our threshold of 4 cubic yards. The thinking is with the fee, if a pile is between 4 cubic yards and 8 cubic yards, they would be charged $200. So it would be multiplied by the size of the pile. It wouldn't just be $100 regardless of the size of pile, just to make that clear.
Thank you. David?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Deanna. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I was coming home from out of town this morning and saw piles of brush in the street, leaf bags falling apart in the street, just on my route back from the train station. So it's great that we picked up on Friday, but I do want to just make everybody aware that this is it's going to be an ongoing education issue. and it'll take a while for really all the residents to get the message. I'm guessing the people who have their brush out right now are not the same ones who got notices from our compliance officer. At least I hope that's not the case. The one other thing I wanted to ask, because I did see a pile of branches that were just up on top of the curb, and I know that in some areas that belongs to the municipality. I'm curious about the conversations that Sandy's been having, with people to sort of say, oh, you can, has she been telling you can move it onto the curb just for now, until the collection in August, but in general that shouldn't be done either, and things really should be kept in the yard until the collection date. What's the policy on that?
Yeah, so again, she's trying to educate people, work with them. Not everybody has a landscaper. Not everybody is able-bodied to be able to drag the material back and forth a long distance. So we're trying to be reasonable and work with people so that if they can at least just get it off of the roadway and they can use that grass verge, then we're allowing that to happen. Just again, we want compliance and people to understand why we're doing this and not to be punitive.
And I guess just the third thing I want to mention from an educational standpoint to sort of tag team on what Eve was saying about the stormwater, Sustainable Princeton is really trying to help us educate the public. Really the best thing to do with your yard waste is keep it in your yard and, mow your leaves into the grass. It's good for the grass. It saves use of fossil fuels in the collection. There are just all kinds of benefits to doing that. So as we go through a sort of a revamp of all of our waste management, landfill, recycling, and organics, just want to really emphasize to people that the very best thing you can do, both for the environment and for your yard, is keep it on your yard.
Okay, any other council? Leticia?
Yes, thank you. So I want to commend you, Deanna, for I think you're doing a great job with outreach and education. So our residents should know about the schedule for leaf and brush pickup. But you mentioned that not everybody has a landscaper, but a lot of our residents do. And I think it's on the homeowners to let their landscapers know what the schedule is. Because not everybody's registered, not all landscapers are registered with the municipality. So first, I would say for residents to encourage their landscapers to register with the municipality, and if they're not, to share the schedule with them.
Yep.
That's it.
Thank you. We have emailed the new information flyer to all of the registered landscapers, both in English and Spanish.
Thank you.
Leighton?
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. I think this is a great job, and I just want to say the charge for people not in compliance, I think, is a good idea, because those who continue not to be in compliance probably can afford to have the town pick up their brush and leaves. But that being said, I do want to put a precautionary note out. A lady that lives at 188 John Street came to see me last Wednesday with an issue with the pickup. And her issue was that leaves fall in July and August, and in particular, all neighborhoods aren't made equal. In the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, there are very small lots, leaves fall, and unlike other neighborhoods, some of the people in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood do not want to keep their leaves around over extended periods of time. Not everyone, unfortunately, is into native trees and sustainable growth like that. One of the requests that possibly could be made is not necessarily being made, that in particular neighborhoods that have these difficulties, maybe there could be an on-call where on one day in either July or August, we might be able to go out, if it's coordinated, and pick up trash in the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood and possibly other neighborhoods that may be under duress with regard to the smallness of their lots.
We'll take that into consideration. We've also, based on the spring schedule that we had, I know there was the concern that some of the collection ended in May for different sections. So I think looking ahead, what we'll do is do a town-wide sweep, maybe at the end of June, and then, so we wouldn't necessarily do a July collection, but we'll take a look at it and see what works best.
Thank you.
Mia?
To Leighton's point, I have expressed interest in some sort of distinguishing system between some of the inner neighborhoods that formed the former borough, because I do think that not all of them, but some of them have constraints that are very different. The pattern of the built environment is very different, and it's not, for many things, a one-size-fits-all. This and many other municipal policies, just because we consolidate it does not necessarily mean that we can do that. On the other hand, I know that sometimes for staff and for all sorts of regulations, it really is just too complicated to differentiate. But this is one area where maybe possibly, we should look into that. But more importantly, your main question, Deanna, was not so much, the first question was invoicing versus, I think, summons, but beyond that, was the question of cost, and I think you wanted a consensus from council on what should be charged. And so my understanding is that there's a range between 100, what you recommended, and 400 was a number that I heard that I won't pin on anyone. So there's a range between those numbers, and I think, so I'm interested to hear what my colleagues have to say within the range of those numbers.
Michelle, you haven't gone yet, please.
Just on the range, I would think as a first go-around, people are just being educated. I would leave it to staff to make the final, but I would say the $100 seems reasonable, and maybe on the second or third time you go to the summons, and maybe at the second time, then you start to, charge per pile, so to speak. I think right now it's kind of, you've given the warning, now you're given, a penalty, and then maybe with that penalty, you say in the future, it could be more, depending. So that would be my suggestion, but I'm pretty open.
Other? Yep, good. David and then Leticia.
Yeah, I'll just say, my goal would be to charge people what it actually costs us. So I like the fact, because it sounds like it was one truck worth of piles that were collected on Friday, and it only took about an hour to go around and collect them, and there was only one tipping fee at the center, $550. It sounds like $100 is about the right cost. I think we do have to keep an eye, though, on, what resident behavior looks like in the future, because if there's just depending on how compliant people are and sort of what happens going forward, I can imagine a situation where the cost really could be more for the municipality, and it's not fair to to require some residents to follow the rules and do what they're supposed to do and keep things efficient for staff, and then have others, expect to get a deluxe service of, their own personal pickup whenever they want. So just keep track of what it actually costs.
Will do.
Leticia?
So I would say that I consider it fair to charge a fee for those who are non-compliant, but at the same time, I would like for us to possibly consider an accommodation for residents who either have mobility issues, don't have a landscaper, don't have a yard where they can store or space to store the brush and leaf. But if we could have some consideration and accommodate the residents who might fall under those whatever guidelines we set.
Eve?
Sorry, I'll just reiterate what I said before. $100 sounds, fine for the first time, but it should come with a warning that, a next citation will come with a court summons. That's what I would advocate.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say, my concern is seeing all the piles that I saw today. It's clear not everyone is either getting the message, and I understand it's a big change, so it's going to take some time, but I think we may have to enlist some help between Public Works and police, letting Sandra, our compliance officer, know where all these piles are located. I don't see how it's possible for her to cover the town. There's just too many piles out already.
Yeah.
So I think over the weekend, a lot of people put more stuff out, and we should be aggressive in getting people the oops notices and saying, hey, here's the deal, you got to pull it back. And then hopefully we get compliance, and by next year, people get in the mode of what we're doing. Because we just can't continue to spend all the money and hours of time on staff time picking up piles day after day. We're just, too many other things we need to do that we're not getting done. So, leaving it, I don't know, I think the $100 is kind of light, but it's fine for now, I guess. All right, any other words of wisdom, or can we, okay, was that all you had, Deanna?
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, let me just jump back. Were there any other council announcements or reports? All right, before we get to the police report, Bernie, any other staff at this point?
Just to let you know, we're having a problem with Zoom,
Yeah.
so just so you're aware of that.
Yeah, I would announce it to everybody on Zoom, but they can't hear me, so. Oh, well.
Is YouTube working, though? YouTube is working. Okay, so if people are receiving texts and the audience are here, you could let your colleagues know you can get to the municipal YouTube channel by typing in Municipality of Princeton into YouTube, and it should come up.
Should.
So.
Thank you. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I have the June police report prepared for you. This report was highlighted by our Citizen Police Academy graduation, which was a first for our department and was one of the many short-term goals that I had wanted to accomplish after becoming chief. So we're very excited about that. Just by way of update, on June 13th, we graduated 3 police officers from the Mercer County Police Academy, Patrolman Toombs, Patrolman McCoy, and Patrolman Mastrangeli. And they've begun their field training program. And finally, we're in the final stages of our most recent recruitment and selection process. Conditional offers of employment were given to 6 applicants. These offers were conditional on each of them completing a physical exam, drug screening, and a psychological exam as well. And my hope is for this process to be complete in time for me to prepare a resolution for the August 14th council meeting. And that's all.
Thank you. I would just like to point out and thank the chief and the department. Former Princeton Township Police Chief Jack Petrone died last week, and his funeral was today, and our police department was out in force to help honor him and bid a formal and very fitting farewell to him. So I'd like to express my thanks, Chief, to you, and please share that with all the officers that were able to be there today.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm sorry, David?
Yeah, thanks. Just a really quick question or comment. In looking at the crash statistics, I noticed that there are crashes involving bicycles, crashes involving pedestrians. There's nothing about crashes involving scooters. And I'm curious, number one, are those counted in with bicycles right now or with pedestrians? And number two, could we maybe have a special category for that? I think it's a more and more popular and Wild West-y kind of transportation mode. So I'd like to know what's going on with the scooters independently.
Yeah, so we can certainly look at creating a category if it, after we sit down and look at it. I think worth mentioning, I met with the university last Friday to discuss scooters and their approach across the street, and we made some good progress. So we look forward to continuing to address it through education and enforcement. But I will certainly, after this meeting, get back and take a look at some of the data that we have and get back to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Leticia?
Thank you. So mine is more of an observation, not necessarily a question. I have under your report on the non-criminal incidents, I noticed that still under the emotionally disturbed person incidents, the numbers from pre-pandemic numbers have more than doubled in the last couple of years. So obviously it's still, it's an ongoing issue that for our community that we need to address, and hopefully I think we are trying to work on finding solutions on what we can do to what is obviously an issue still in our community, and I would imagine that as the first responders to those type of incidents, that we would want to consult with you, Chief, on what your experience has been and what is needed in our community.
Yeah, thank you. So those numbers are clearly elevated, and I think worth mentioning is that for a period of time after the pandemic, some of the training that was available to us outside our department wasn't as available, and we're just now beginning to get our officers into crisis intervention training, which is an incredible tool for our men and women to deal with those situations. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the training opportunities that are now available, and we're going to continue to go out and handle these situations as delicately and as best we can.
Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? Okay, Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next up, we have two proclamations. The first is a proclamation honoring Charles Sugg on the occasion of his retirement. Chip, we're going to read the proclamation, and then we're done. If you'd come up, and then me and I are going to give you an actual copy or an original of the proclamation for you to hang. It's probably in your living room, and take everything else down and hang just that and put lights on it. But we're all going to take, it's in front of everybody, and we've all got a line or two to speak on this one. And Leighton, you get to kick us off.
Proclamation, Office of the Mayor, Municipality of Princeton, a proclamation honoring Charles Sugg on the occasion of his retirement. Whereas the Municipality of Princeton is proud to recognize Charles Sugg, Rental Housing Inspection Manager of Housing Inspection, for his dedication to public service on the occasion of his retirement, and
Whereas Charles Sugg began his career with Princeton on March 25, 1996, in the role of Fire Housing Inspector in the Princeton Borough Bureau of Fire Safety, and
Whereas Charles became the Housing Inspection Manager of the Bureau of Rental Housing Inspections on November 1st, 2014, and
Whereas Charles is a member of the Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad and has served our community as a rescue associate since March of 2016. Whereas Charles is a member of the Hightstown Fire Department and has served his community as a volunteer firefighter since February 9, 1984. He has also held the position of Assistant Chief of the department.
Whereas Charles was the winner of the Super Chili Bowl contest. Woo! In February 2022, delivering the best tasting chili to his fellow employees, and
Whereas Charles Sugg's retirement from the Municipality of Princeton will be effective August 1st, 2023, and whereas Charles's willingness to offer his time, assistance, and knowledge gained from his experience has been invaluable to the Princeton community.
Whereas Charles Sugg has served the community of Princeton with pride for 27 years, and upon the occasion of his retirement, is deserving of recognition and the highest commendation. Now therefore be it resolved, I, Mark Frieda, Mayor of Princeton, extend the municipality's humble expression of appreciation and sincerest congratulations to Charles Sugg. We offer our best wishes for a long, happy, and healthy retirement.
Mayor, can we do a group photo? You want to do a group photo?
Yeah.
Okay, next we're going to do a proclamation for Dolores Williams. Dolores could not be here with us this evening, but she is working this week, so we will get her the proclamation either this week or on her very last day next Monday. Michelle, you start us off on this one.
Okay, proclamation, Office of the Mayor, Municipality of Princeton. A proclamation honoring Dolores A. Williams on the occasion of her retirement. Whereas the Municipality of Princeton is proud to recognize Dolores A. Williams, Municipal Clerk, for her dedication to public service on the occasion of her retirement, and
Whereas Dolores began her career with the Borough of Princeton November 5th, 1993, as a secretary in the office of the former mayor and her mentor, Marvin Reed, and
Whereas Dolores has held many titles as she progressed through her professional career with Princeton, including secretary, assistant clerk, deputy municipal clerk, and municipal clerk, and has served in the administration of 6 mayors. And
Whereas prior to her career with the borough, Dolores served in the United States military for nearly 7 years as a weapons specialist in the Army. And
Whereas Dolores A. Williams earned the prestigious designation of Certified Municipal Clerk from the Institute of Municipal Clerks, an honor reserved for municipal clerks who have met a rigorous set of education and experience requirements, and
Whereas Dolores' retirement from the municipality of Princeton will be effective August 1st, 2023, and
Whereas, in addition to serving her country, Dolores has served the community of Princeton with pride for 30 years, and upon the occasion of her retirement, is deserving of recognition and the highest commendation. Now therefore be it resolved, I, Mark Frieda, Mayor of Princeton, extend the municipality's humble expression of appreciation and sincerest congratulations to Dolores A. Williams. We offer our best wishes for a long, happy, and healthy retirement. Okay, thank you. Next up, public comments for items not on the agenda. So anyone in the room or on Zoom that wishes to make a comment for something, again, that's not on the agenda, we'll do in the room first. If you do, just come up to the podium, state your name and address, and there is a 3-minute limit, so be concise, but welcome. Might not be. I think it's on now.
Should be on.
You're good.
It is
Steve.
on. Concerning yard waste,
Steve, could you just give your name and address?
Steve Hildner, 139 North Harrison, where we cannot put yard waste out in the street because it's a busy street, and my taxes have gone up probably 20% in the last year or two. Still don't have yard waste service. One word for you, nice roll, well, more words, sorry. I think you have the roll carts out for trash. You need roll carts for yard waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else in the room have a comment for something not on the agenda? All right. Adam, do we have anybody on? Adam's the guy in the back working the technology, sorry. But Adam, do we have anybody on Zoom that has a hand up? Same rules, please state your name and address, and there's 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Adam, can we turn that up a little? Go ahead, Josh.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Joshua Zinder.
Yep.
I live at 142 Moore Street in Princeton. Couple things. First, for those of you who are on YouTube, the passcode for the Zoom call tonight is 560824. It's not on any of your public documents. It really should be. Some of us can't make it to the meeting tonight. We should have the opportunity to be there. At least comment. Second, with regard to the yard waste, there were at 142 Moore Street, the notice was that we were supposed to paper bag our yard waste. We did this. We put out the bags. The bags have been sitting out in front of our house for almost 2 months now, and nobody's come by to pick them up. There have been numerous times where our neighbors have dumped their yard waste on the street, and that's been picked up. So if you set a policy and nobody bothers to follow it, and in addition, the town doesn't follow through by picking up what they're telling everybody to do, it's problematic. And meanwhile, those paper bags, having been out there, are composting. You know, they're falling apart, and they've been out there waiting for somebody to come by and pick them up. So I'm not sure what the disconnect is, but it's not working. Top to bottom, that policy is not working. The next item I wanted to mention was there have been numerous violations sent out across town relating to outdoor dining. This situation really needs to be resolved. There is a major disconnect. If you happen to own the sidewalk in front of the property as the property owner, you need to get a zoning board approval. But if the sidewalk happens to be owned by the town, all you need to do is pay the fee and submit a plan. This is a very odd distinction and should be remedied via proper ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. Okay. Anyone else on Zoom have an item for something not on the agenda?
Hello?
Hey, Jess. Could you just state your name and address?
Hi, I'm Jessica Atkins, and I'm here representing myself, and I live at 204 Mount Lucas Road. And I actually have a comment about yard waste too, and I love Steve Hiltner's idea. That was a great idea to have a cart to put the yard waste out. But I just wanted to call to your attention that when I had yard waste out on the street, and so did my neighbors, and I guess they talked to whoever came around. I didn't get to talk to the woman who came. But she mentioned that, oh, well, you should just compost the yard waste. And I actually do agree with that in many cases, but I wanted to call something to your attention, which is diseased plant material. You cannot compost it without potentially spreading the disease further into your yard because some things overwinter in the soil. So if you have a small yard like me, that's not really a really good option without harming your landscaping or harming the rest of the plants or trees in your yard. And I had the same problem where I put mine out the last week of pickup. No one ever got it, and it sat there for a really long time and started decomposing. And I had to shovel it basically into big bins and have 1-800-GOT-JUNK come and get it because it wasn't picked up. But I did follow the schedule. So I just wanted to just put those points out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Jess. All right, do we have anyone else on Zoom? Okay. Usually we don't get into a back and forth with people for the public comment, but let me just say a couple things real quick. As far as attending meetings, our public notice is pretty clear that if you want to pretty much guarantee that you know what's going on in the meeting, you need to be here and actually physically present, that we do our best to provide the Zoom option. But if there is a problem with the technology, the meeting still continues. And it's rare that we have a problem with the Zoom option, so we apologize for the problem that happened this evening, but it is possible. On the compost, I think the new mailing that's about to go out will make it much clearer to people as to when to put out what, and I know there has been confusion in the past over when to put something in a bag and what we will pick up from a bag, et cetera. And on outdoor dining, we had a presentation, I think, just at the last meeting, and that'll be coming back again soon, so we are working on that also. So with that, I am going to close the public comment section of the meeting. And Dr. Shanley, I believe you are up next. Cindy, you're leading us? Thank you very much. Do your whatever. I'm sorry.
Passcode, is that the deal? Do we normally not have a passcode, but tonight there was one? Or what?
I'm not sure what the problem is,
Okay, because
but usually it's really easy to get right on, so I'm not sure what happened.
I mean, I think the system tonight generated a passcode for some reason.
I gotta find out.
I think since someone knows the passcode, maybe we should, Josh knows it, maybe we should announce it again.
Well, so I'm Cindy Taylor, the Open Space Manager, and I'm just here to introduce Dr. Trish Shanley today. Dr. Shanley is presenting on the benefits of recreation and natural open space with members of Ridgeview Conservancy's Youth Stewardship Group, the Ridgeview Turtles. Dr. Shanley has worked internationally as a forest scientist for over 30 years and was a senior research scientist at the Center for International Forestry Research in Indonesia. She worked with forest-based communities in the eastern Amazon, concentrating on the impacts of logging on locally valued fruit and medicinals. In addition, she has worked in forests with underserved urban teens in New Jersey. For the past 3 years, she has been a member of 2 global forest expert panels, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and the 16-member expert panel for the International Union of Forestry Research Organizations, producing a report on forests and trees for human health. She serves on the steering committee of Plants and People International and is the director of stewardship for Ridgeview Conservancy. The mission of Ridgeview Conservancy is to conserve forests and wetlands, to foster connections with nature, especially for youth, and to provide equitable access to nature for all.
Great. Good. Thank you, Cindy. It's a real privilege to be here. I know you've got busy plates and you work really hard to keep Princeton such a wonderful place to live. So thank you for allowing us to be here. And the Forest Stewards are really glad to be able to speak also. So I'll be brief. You don't want to read any of those tomes we write for all those expert panels. They get too dull. So I'm going to try to just summarize very briefly in 16 slides some of the results that are relevant for Princeton, but to give an idea of what's been found out globally as well. And then I'll turn it over to the students to give their impressions, because truthfully, Princeton is their future, and we need to hear from them also. Next slide. So basically what the global findings are today is that our health is linked to forests. They're intrinsically linked. We were hunter-gatherers for 99.9% of our time on Earth, and that's still in our DNA. We've only become sedentary and indoors really recently. So what happens is that the loss and degradation of forests impacts us enormously. And there's a new term for a disease called environmental grief. When you drive by or walk by that forest that you loved or that field, and it's no longer there. So people feel that inside themselves. So it's remarkable, but only 20% of the world's forests are currently intact. 40% are gone. We've already done that. The other 40% are impoverished or degraded. So we don't have much to work with. And what we're trying to do in Princeton and with many other towns is to restore some of that degraded area and make more intact. So that's important. The other major theme happening globally is equitable access to green space, because there's disparity in health outcomes, whether you live near green or not near green, and they're fairly substantial. So it's really important people are looking at that as a social environmental justice issue. So, and that's diminishing globally. There's a privatization of green space and a corporatization of green space everywhere, and it's a tough thing to push against. So what's needed is cross-sectoral collaboration. You need to get the engineers and the conservationists, the public health planners, and the urban planners together in one room and say, what can we do to make this place a good place to live? All right. So why are they so important? Access to nature and forests, it lowers morbidity and mortality. If you live near green, you probably can live 8 to 10 years longer. So this is really important, and it can be longer than that. Being near green vastly magnifies the benefits of exercise and recreation. So a lot of times think, oh, I'll just go to the basketball court. If you are near green, you will get a whole lot of other benefits that you will not get if you're not near green. So putting physical exercise and green space together is about the best thing you can do to improve your lifespan and your quality of life, because you improve your cognition and your mental health as well. And also, it helps with disease regulation, all sorts of diseases. We'll go into that later. It promotes community. Green spaces, you don't fight in them as much. There's not much aggression. It really calms us all down, and it brings us more peace. So it's really important to have green nearby, and we'll see what's next. So how does it do this? You always hear these things, right? But how does it happen? What's the scientific mechanism by which this stuff happens? So basically, you walk into the forest, and your brain releases natural opiates, and you feel calmer. But the miraculous thing is that you also get reinvigorated. So it's both calming and invigorating. It's like a smart pill, and it's an advanced drug that targets selective receptors, and we cannot do this. No pharmaceutical is able to do this like nature can. So basically, 300 negative thoughts a minute, this self-obsession, comes to each of us. You know, da-da-da-da, tomorrow this, why not this? And so when you go into the woods, it tends to get that self-wallowing diminished, because the world is a bigger place and you realize you're smaller, and there's a lot of other beautiful things going on. So it cuts down on that. When you walk into the woods and you deeply inhale, do that, because you're going to be inhaling these phytoncides, and they're miraculous. Like, it's an olfactory medicine, and they're full of terpenes. They give you a physiological tune-up. They help your immune system, and they also help tumor cells to self-destruct. So you really want to be out there, because it's an anti-cancer medicine by walking in the woods. So places like Korea and Japan, the whole cancer clinics send their people to nature, to walking trails for a certain amount of time a day to help with their treatment. So this is very serious. After a few days in nature, there was a 40% increase in NK cells. That's the natural killer cells. It lasted 7 days. There was a 50% rise in creativity. That's the aha moment. So people like Einstein and Oppenheimer, why were they in the Institute for Advanced Studies? They were deliberately put there because they knew that that forest would inspire creative thinking and a connection to nature that you can lose when you're indoors. So this is good to know for people in some of our age group. It also protects the brain from premature aging. So there's telomeres linked to our chromosomes, and when they shrink, it doesn't go so well for our brain. So we want to be out there and ensure that they're healthy and long. And then we can get into a flow state like athletes. Like without doing that whole marathon, when you're outside in nature, you can actually reach that flow meditative state, which is really important. Okay, so what are the synergies between recreation and open space? So one, walking in nature magnifies many-fold the physical benefits of exercise. If you do it in nature versus on the street, not the same outcome, not the same health outcome at all. So to the extent that we can allow our residents to be close to nature and to do their walking on trails, it's far better outcomes. It gives you this cognitive reboot, when you're just, you get into nature and it's like improves your capacity to learn. It helps you solve problems. As Dorothy Wordsworth, William's sister, said, in walking, it will be solved. And Nietzsche said, all truly great thoughts are achieved while walking. So the whole concept of walking in many cultures like England and Scotland is all about lyricism and poetry and being linked to the earth and having a whole spiritual reboot, not just a cognitive one. So it's really reaching another state of mind and being connected to nature, which is what we need since we used to be connected there for so long. We know it reduces depression and lowers anxiety and stress. It actually improves self-esteem. And after all these years of COVID, it increases our sociability. So it's good to help us get out and be together. So a lot of states and towns and countries are working on ensuring open space is actually available to all. So Copenhagen, Japan, Korea, all of Scandinavia, they're looking at how far your doorstep should be from the closest open space. And we'll look at that later. All right, that's personal health. Let's look at planetary health. Basically, if you get 190 countries to agree to something, you know something's wrong. We have a major crisis on our hands with climate change and biodiversity loss. This is completely unprecedented. Truthfully, from these global forest expert panels I'm on, I can tell you that it's not 30. It's 50% they actually want to save the Earth. So the Earth is in ICU, and forests are the best natural defense because they harbor the most biodiversity also against climate change and against for biodiversity loss. So they're really, really important. So to achieve this, states and towns have to work towards 30 by 30. It's wonderful news to say that Princeton's, with all the work that you have been doing, we're up to 27%. That's amazing, and 21% of that is accessible. Some of it's private open space, but our neighbors are luckily high numbers, which helps us because that's a big buffer of green around us, like Hopewell and Montgomery. So that's excellent, and we're working together to make those connections to those open spaces, because wouldn't it be exciting to walk from here to the Saraland Mountains, give your kid a backpack, get out of the house, go camping, and walk back without a car? This is what we want to work towards. Okay. All right. So here we are in Princeton. Each of these green gems there was the result of a lot of hard work by individuals and groups over many decades, and they're amazing. Okay? So let's say we have those green gems in our hand, and we throw them on the ground in the room. They scatter all over. So what if we collect them and we string them together so that we really magnify the beauty and the benefit? We can wear it and show it off. Currently, they're sort of hard to find. They're not linked. They're beautiful, each of them individually. But if they were strung together with some kind of connection, it's vastly better for the wildlife and for the people because you could reach these places. So the idea is to connect them through sidewalks, easements, and access to all without cars, walking, less air pollution, clean air. And there's a lot of folks in town, truthfully, that don't have cars. And they would be able to bring their families to green space if we had more connections between these beautiful green places. So the idea is really smart growth downtown while we keep the strategic green infrastructure in the forests and in those green areas for low flooding. It's against heat island effect. It's carbon resilience. So we're on the right track, and you guys are doing a phenomenal job. Okay, so there's cities and towns all over the place that we can use as models, and they're doing really well. They get more tourist dollars. Their property values go up. they raise the quality of life, and it's all about green infrastructure and climate resilience. So Boston, DC, Houston, the DC Trail, 23,000 visitors a week. I mean, they're running, they're walking, they're 90 years old, they're 2 years old. It's a beautiful thing because it's intergenerational contact, and that's what this does too. These green areas, they find that in Scandinavia. And intergenerational contact is an indicator of a healthy culture. And that's something sometimes in America we lack. So it's a beautiful thing. If you make green areas, the grandfather might bring the kid there, and it's a beautiful thing for parents and kids too. So wouldn't it be cool if instead of just the LHT Trail, the Lawrence Hopewell Trail, we could help make the Lawrence Hopewell Princeton Montgomery Rocky Hill Trail? Now we're talking. Like, that's exciting, and that would, link us to our neighbors in a way it's visionary, it's exciting. And this is Kylie on the bridge there. Her dad just had to leave, but he has helped her figure out how to do a 25-mile loop around Princeton, the actual Emerald Necklace. They're like trudging through and figuring out how to do it, and they're meeting with Cindy to figure out where are these easements and how can we make them happen. It's not that hard. You're almost there. And she said it was the happiest day in her life. Okay, the day she walked that with her father. And it could be 60 miles. If you do all the interlinking trails in Princeton, it could be 60 miles. So you can get a good workout. And it's sort of like you don't have to drive to the AT, the Appalachian Trail. Kids could learn about how you can hike and really be out there in nature. It's way exciting. It's so much more exciting than going to one park, driving to another, which is really about people with cars who have access to vehicles that many people do not have. So LHPMR, let's go for it. So you have left a green legacy already, and I really want to applaud you for that, because the 153 acres on Province Line Road is a massive green island that links us to Hopewell, and had we knocked that down for 19 homes, we would have created a wall of extinction between Princeton and Hopewell. And that would not be okay because of we've got 1 million species of plants and animals going extinct soon, so it's threatened. So it's a massive carbon reserve. It's good for flood control. And you've also saved Indigenous and African American history. We were thrilled to hear about the sign change today. That's wonderful. And a lot of these habitats for these threatened species, they need to be 100 acres. So if you don't have them connected, they will no longer survive. So luckily that connects to others, and we're hoping to connect it to the one on the right, which you're also helping to preserve, the 90-acre woods that's next to Herrontown Woods. And we have Steve Hiltner and Scott Sillers here who have worked so hard on Herrontown Woods to make that community friendly and a place of cultural vibrancy every weekend with people showing up to get coffee and walk the woods. So these are time-sensitive opportunities, and I really applaud all of you because you've jumped, you've shown transformational leadership. These things come up, and then if you don't get it, it's gone. And it's gone forever, and that link will never be there. So if we want this to happen, we have to just move on it and know that we are the people to make this happen, and it's not going to happen again because we are pretty built out in Princeton because it's such a wonderful place to live. Everybody wants every square inch of swamp, wetland, or whatever to put their house on, and you have not allowed that to happen in particular places, and we really applaud you, the students and I. So, here we go. Wow. So connectivity expands habitat for these rare species. It makes Princeton a lot more interesting to live if we didn't kill all these things off. So fortunately, the barred owl, the bobcat, and the red-shouldered hawk, at least we still have the barred owl and the red-shouldered hawk. The bobcat may have gone the wayside and kept in the Sourlands. We're sad about that due to overbuilding. But this habitat fragmentation is what we have to work against. We have to have connectivity across landscapes and keep the kitchens and the living rooms available for wildlife. We don't want our kitchen taken out, right? Theirs shouldn't be taken out. So swamps are like an open-faced sandwich for a lot of these. They swoop right in there and get their mouths. These are white-footed mice, carry Lyme disease. We want less Lyme disease. The more intact forest we have, the more predators like the red fox, and then less Lyme disease. So we want these forests because they help our health too. So basically, this whole idea of having a connectivity in an emerald necklace creates living linkages across the landscape for flora, fauna, and people. If we make the linkages, we can have people. So forest healing, you hear all about it today, but it reduces medical costs big time. It attracts visitors, it creates jobs, and it benefits the local economy. You have people coming because they can walk your necklace. Okay, the fascinating thing about green space and about the originator of the idea of the Emerald Necklace, Olmsted, he called it the democratization of green space. It elevates us personally and politically. It's protective. It's a buffer to stress, whether that stress is due to poverty or affluence or modernity. You know, we spend 90% of our time indoors, so this is, you know, a way to get out. But it's a social leveler. Everybody's equal in the woods. It doesn't matter what you have on, what kind of shoes you have, what your hair looks like. You're all equal out in the woods. And that's a beautiful thing in today's world of such class consciousness and everything else. And it happens to help the least advantaged. So that's terrific because they don't often have access. So there's these national walking strategies in places like Scotland and Japan and everywhere else where there's forest therapy centers. They're putting millions and millions of dollars into these, and they're national indicators of health about how close you live to a green space. So they're using that as really important to see how is their country doing. So the idea is that it also inspires transformative thinking and awe. These kids are going to face a lot of conflict in their lifetimes. It's going to be really, really difficult, and we need them to have inspired ideas. So we need them to have this time in nature so that they have something to draw from to get those ideas. If they're on their phone for 12 hours a day, which many are, they will not be having those ideas. So we need to make nature nearby so they can get there, and we need to make it attractive. We need nice trails and fun trails, and we need kids making the trails so other kids will pull them in and they'll be magnets. Okay, so just overview, it's a massive tonic. It positively impacts your endocrine system, your respiratory system, your nervous system, your cardiovascular, immune, and there's anti-cancer agents. It supports community building and social cohesion, and it helps intergenerational contact. It lowers aggression and crime, which rises all the time in the news. You pick up the paper and whoa. And then it helps special needs kids. It helps autistic kids and ADHD kids, and we see that in our work. And it's really, really important that those parents have a place they can bring their kids where they can shine and not feel marginalized. So these other countries, Korea, Japan, Scandinavia, they're way ahead. They're all looking at doing this and having connectivity and access. Okay, so I want to introduce you to the Ridgeview Turtles that are here. It's young people protecting old forests. They're amazing. We've worked for 9 years. They come back after college. They change their majors. They go into the environmental field. They're trying to scale up by teaching in the schools now to get young kids interested because they're on phones ever earlier. They feel a sense of purpose. It boosts their mental health and their physical. And there's a lot of career opportunities happening in this because all urban centers will need to be green because so much population is there, crime is up, and they need to be green for many, many reasons. So what Olmsted said to end is a sense of enlarged freedom is to all, at all times, the most certain and the most valuable gratification afforded by a park. Enlarged freedom. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And he said at all times to all people. So he was talking about connectivity way back when, and we hope we can continue working together to do that. And we'll just say thank you. Oh, last week, Kate and I got the amazing opportunity to work with 15 youth at the Watershed Academy. We taught forests from like 9 to 5 every day to these youth that we survived. And they all spend between 12 and 8 hours on their phones a day, and mostly inner city youth, a mixture, some kids with autism. And by the time they got out, Dante, he was the final kid, and he said to the crowd that, you know, they had to be the tour guides on a trail. They had to know all the species, they had to know about climate change, and I thought, were they really listening all this week? But it was all participatory, they made them have fun out there. And he said, listen, everybody, trees and forests stand between us and extinction. We need to know them, and we need to protect them. It's like, yes. So if we could do that in 4 days with kids, who have no contact with nature, we need to do it with more kids. And that's what we hope, that Princeton could be like a template for others, where you have kids that go out and help others. So we really thank you, because you've worked really hard and taken risks and jumped a lot of barriers to save what you've saved, and we hope we can continue doing it together. Thank you. That's the next one, is goodbye. There we go. Terrific. Thanks very much. So Kate, Amlan, whose name was on here, he's sick tonight. He was with us. He's in Rutgers. He's finishing, and he wanted to speak to you because it changed his career path. He's an amazing story. Kate and Erin Kim will speak in his stead. Erin just graduated from Princeton High, and she was a leader this past year, and Kate was also and just graduated. So those two will speak on behalf of the Turtles and just give you an idea what they think about all of this.
All right. Cool. Okay. Is that good? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Krell. Like Dr. Shanley mentioned, I just graduated from Princeton High School, and I'm actually planning on taking a gap year to work with Ridgeview Conservancy to help scale up and to bring forest stewardship possibly to other towns, and like she mentioned, use Princeton as a template to do so because of the wonderful effects that's given me and my friends and other people that I know. So, like I mentioned, I've been doing Ridgeview Conservancy, I've been part of it for 3 years now, and what we do is every Sunday we go out into the woods and we learn about all the different flora and fauna and the invasive species, how to identify them, which, this stuff we never learn in school. And we cut out the invasive species to help restore our forests, and we help create trails for the public to eventually access. And so we can share, this amazing nature with other people. And actually at Princeton High School, which was where we were based and where I went to school, we have a community service requirement of 50 hours. And I attained that goal pretty quickly, but I did keep coming back for a lot of reasons. Just being in nature for me was always just so rejuvenating. I think a lot of high schoolers and middle schoolers can experience a lot of academic pressure and a lot of stress. I know I myself have experienced that. There's always a pressure to, get good grades, get into college, and with that, we also use a lot of technology on a daily basis, right? We're always on our computers, especially during COVID when we were quarantined and use Zoom all the time. So having an outlet like Ridgeview Woods to just go in the forest with friends, make great connections, and to be off of my phone and, to be off of technology was always so rejuvenating. It acted as a distressor for me, and I know for other people. I would walk in feeling, tired, stressed out, walk out feeling energized and ready for another week of school. So another thing that it really helped me attain was it helped foster this connection to forests that I didn't really have before. And that made me really passionate to protect them and also to share them with other people. If I experienced all these great benefits, I want other people to as well, other Princeton residents. And perhaps that's why I'm so passionate about the whole Emerald Necklace project. Like Dr. Shanley mentioned and talked about, the project is basically linking all of our forests to create kind of like a ring of forests around Princeton. That would be great for wildlife. I love hearing wildlife in the woods and stuff like that. And for people, having equitable access to forests is something that just is really important to me. As someone who lives in Griggs Farm, being able to, walk from Griggs Farm to Ridgeview Woods, for example, by just going through forests on a trail would be absolutely amazing. And Griggs Farm is a place that is one of the most densely populated places with middle school and high school students, all facing, the same societal and academic stresses that I've also faced. So having an outlet for them would be really cool. And just being able to share the magic and the beauty of forests that I always witness whenever I walk in. I want other people and other Princeton residents to be able to experience that too. And another thing that it really helps create for a lot of us is kind of a sense of empowerment. Climate change in itself is a really big issue. We learn about it like it's this big, global, intricate issue, and as high schoolers, we tend to think, oh, well, I'm so young, kind of like so small, like what can I do to help, you know, this giant issue that is, you know, really, really bad, that, you know, it's for the planet. And being able to go out and, you know, cut out invasive species, help restore our forests, help protect our forests, it's local action that makes a difference. And being able to make a difference as, you know, a young person really makes us feel really empowered and really passionate about this type of stuff. So if by going out every Sunday for a couple hours to take in the beauty of nature has connected us to it, I hope the same admiration and passion can grow in other Princeton residents. So, and from my experience, a simple opportunity to venture into green space could sprout seeds of fulfillment and passion whilst doing our part to protect this precious planet. So I urge you all to take a walk in nature and to silence your phones and let the music of its life wash over you. Experience and appreciate this wonderful gift Earth has given us that is right on our doorstep that everyone should get to partake in. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Erin Kim, and I'm a rising senior at Princeton High School. I've been with Ridgeview Conservancy since my sophomore year, and I'm just here to talk about my experiences with Ridgeview and how it's kind of helped change my life as a young person. So, as Kate mentioned, sophomore year, we're required to have 50 hours of community service, and at the community service fair, I saw Ridgeview Conservancy had a stand. And when I first saw it, I thought back to my very early childhood when I was very obsessed with nature and animals in particular. And I also thought back to my grandpa who had the opportunity to teach me about nature and like different edible plants and things like that, which really helped me feel grounded here in the United States because as a first generation American citizen, my parents don't have the same connection with America that I do. So I found it really rewarding to be able to give back to Ridgeview Conservancy once I joined it. And as a student at Princeton High School, I face a lot of academic pressure, as Kate mentioned. Last year, I took all accelerated and AP classes, and despite that and my very busy schedule, I still made the time to come to Ridgeview every single Sunday, being in the woods and helping out remove invasive species. And I found it, instead of taking away from my time, actually adding to it because it helped me focus and perform better in school just because of how grounding it was and anxiety reducing. And that's something that I really praise and am forever grateful to Ridgeview Conservancy for giving me the opportunity to have. And I can only hope that the youth in the future have the same opportunities as I do to have access to these forests. When I think about the future generation, I think about my little sister who's 9. And she doesn't have the same connection to nature that I do. She didn't get the same opportunities with my grandpa. And I try very hard to foster the connection between her and nature. And I think that Ridgeview Conservancy has helped me do that in terms of being able to identify certain plants and teach her and create a love for nature between her and the trees and the forests that my grandparents aren't able to do. And I would also like to thank Dr. Shanley for being a mentor in the forest and teaching me and fostering that intergenerational connection that I now have with the forests. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to thank you all, first of all, and good to see the 4 of you again. I don't know if anybody has any comments, or Michelle?
I just want to thank Trish. Your energy You're obviously getting it from being out in the open. But you are such an inspiration. And I have to say, of all the things that we're doing on council, I would personally say that there's nothing that we've done that's more important than conserving those acres. There's no going back, and I totally get it. And we wouldn't do it without your inspiration and leadership, so I just want to thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Trish, we love you. What can I say? Yes, what she said, it has been so important to us, and it's your vision that has led us through this really very significant preservation effort in a short time that has sort of paralleled some of the more extensive building environments from in our core, and we have balanced that with preserving key environmentally sensitive areas in our perimeter, which I just want to stress is the model of smart growth in a community, is that balance that the current council has tried to emulate, and it informs all of our decision making, and we appreciate having you as a partner and your support in both of those prongs. And I also wanted to just touch on the fact that one of the reasons we wanted to have you come and present is because this vision of, or this version of recreation is a form of physical activity and mental well-being that lasts throughout the lifespan, through all, for people with all sorts of varying abilities, both mentally and physically. And it is the vision that we want to move toward in our community, as opposed to, I would say there are still certain sectors of our community who are very attached to sort of a mid-century vision of recreation, which is of competitive youth sports. And that is tends to accrue to often more affluent families who can afford to buy all of the equipment. The beauty of what you have helped us to preserve is that this is accessible for everyone, and we are working hard to make it even more accessible and to be responsible in our stewardship, so that we're not just acquiring open space, but we are responsibly stewarding it, and that's a priority for us. But I wondered, and I know we've had a long meeting, but I wondered if you wanted to just say a few words about sort of the old model of recreation and what you're presenting, because I think this is where we want to move, or maybe, it's already been said. Up to you.
You just said it well, that one, you can do your whole life. You don't need a team member. You don't have to pay any money. It's right out your door. And the advantages to outdoors is so remarkable versus just being on a court or competitive. Like, we have to move towards not only a vision of competition and me against you, which is what these kids face every day at school, whether it's sports or academics, but when they come together to work together to preserve open space and restore the forest, it's all about working together. And to solve the problems of the world in the future, it's going to be about working together. It's not going to be about competition and sports. And it's a different kind of physicality, and it's a different kind of thinking pragmatically. Nobody knows how to read the landscape. They can't know one species from the other. They're going to need to know about their environment. They really will, in terms of climate change and species extinction and where water is. So getting closer to nature is going to be important, because environment is going to be part of health and law and engineering. Whatever they go into, they're going to need it. So it's pragmatic to have open space and this type of recreation as part of their livelihoods. Whereas sports, as soon as you're no good anymore. You're washed up after your third, whatever happened to your knee or shin splint, right? But not in the woods. It helps you rejuvenate, and they're going to need to know this knowledge for their future. So I think Princeton's doing a great thing by educating, and we hope to scale this up because every kid needs it. We could see it last week with the 15 kids from Trenton. They turned into like young environmentalists in 5 days. You know, they came in not liking trees, not knowing trees, and they went out like loving trees and knowing them and talking about the benefits of sassafras and why oak is important and what the hickory gives and singing songs about hickory and oak, okay? So I think incorporating this is critical to connect kids with nature because they're disconnected, and that's part of our mental health problems. And we're never going to have enough therapists in our country or in the world to deal with the mental health problems. I'm not saying that nature is the go-to for everything, but it can certainly, all the robust research, longitudinal data, many countries, many years, shows that it's a massive tonic for your brain, for your body, and your spirit. And so I think we need to tap into that, and we'd be unwise if we didn't.
Thank you. I actually think we should have our council meetings outside going forward, in the forest.
We'll bring our clippers. Eve?
Yep. So, Trish, not too much to add to that. Just, you know, it's been an honor to work with you over the last few years and to watch the work that you're doing with the turtles and to hear your, the Ridgeview Turtles, your passionate voices about the impact of this. So I think, you know, everything else has been said, but thanks to all of you for being here tonight, for taking your time, for sharing your experiences, and you know, we really appreciate it. And you know, we need you guys to go out there and do what our generation did not. So it's a heavy burden on your shoulders. So I know that spending time in the woods will help you and make you ready to do this work. So thank you all.
Thanks again. We appreciate you being here this evening. Okay. We are going to, and you don't have to stay for any more of the meeting, so feel free to jump up and get out at any point. Next up is the Special Improvement District. We have a public hearing on the 2023-2024 budget of the Princeton Special Improvement District. So first we need a motion. Michelle, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion.
Is there a second? Mia's got the second. And questions? I'm sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to cede most of my time to the Executive Director, Isaac Kramer, but I wanted to say a few words, if I may. So, you know, this has been the first year. This is the first complete year for the Special Improvement District called Experience Princeton now. And I just want to, you know, highlight what this is accomplishing, you know, having closed out the first year. I mean, we have a strong board of directors of 18 volunteers that are from the business community, property owners, business owners. We have hired last October an executive director, Isaac Kramer, who has extensive experience in this, so we're very lucky to have him on board. We've built a robust website, which is a portal to the town. It will become more and more robust. We have a marketing program with shop local promotions that we're working on. We've really begun to be a connection between the community, the businesses, and the town, which is really an important conduit for information and for problem solving. So I won't go into all the details, I'll leave that to Isaac, but I don't want to steal your thunder, but I did want to mention these things like working on issues such as the outdoor dining, working on trash collection, signage, allowable uses, and so on and so forth. So I'll cede the rest of my time. Thank you, Isaac, for being here. And I just wanted to say thank you for all that we're accomplishing, and thanks to the board for all their hard work, all the volunteers that are helping to contribute, and all the teams that have been created and are working. So thank you.
Isaac, if just for the people on Zoom, and for when we take the minutes, if you just state your name, that would be helpful.
Happy to. Isaac Kramer, Executive Director of Experience Princeton. Thank you, Your Honor. I just have some brief prepared remarks, and then we'll be available for questions. I'm reminded of the proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And I think what you're about to hear is we're planting trees vis-a-vis a really vibrant local economy and providing the support that our businesses throughout Princeton need. So with that, on the budget that we brought forward to you, that revenue is slightly decreased by about $12,000 from the prior fiscal year. But I want to emphasize steady and predictable revenue is the foundation that Improvement District work is built upon. And as the program grows, our ability to increase and raise additional funding will go up, especially through contributions and grants. A small point that I make is we actually raised $7,000 last fiscal year to support one of our flagship promotions, the Restaurant Week. We expect to continue to do similar things. Also, our grant writing efforts, we applied for $200,000 in grants. While not funded, we're continuing to track and aggressively go after outside funding, especially that aligns with our mission and the goals as we've laid out. Shifting gears to program services, we have 3 special teams: economic development, streetscapes, and marketing. And they've proposed collectively expenditures of $172,750. This is a modest $17,250 decrease since the prior fiscal year. There's a shift of emphasis with the streetscapes team getting quite a bit more, and with the marketing and economic development team less. But in no way is this a reflection of the relative value of these teams. They're all important. It's more a reflection of where our funding needs are. On the economic development team, we're looking to focus on 3 priority areas. The first being traffic, parking, and wayfinding. The second, allowable uses. And third, the master plan process. And related to that, continuing to look at all of our ordinances and ways to improve them. To support these activities, $40,000 is being requested. Secondly, the streetscapes team will expand their work with $50,000 for plantings and public art. And the express purpose of the streetscape team is to have an impact on all the sub-areas throughout the district. So remember, while we cover Nassau Street and Witherspoon Street, we go far out along Harrison, also State Road. Yasna Polana is in our district, as is the Dinky and a number of other sub-areas. And we want to have a presence in every one of them. An additional $25,000 will go towards seasonal decorations, so that's expanding on our outlay from the prior year, and that'll really enliven the district and all of Princeton during the holiday season. Last but not least, our marketing team will organize around 4 primary activities. The first being website and social media, the second, holiday season, the third are hospitality and welcome activities, including our monthly meetups, and other opportunities we have to bring people together, and the fourth around a shop local campaign. To cover these activities, $70,000 has been budgeted, with an additional $40,000 carried over from the previous fiscal year. So all told, that's the $172,750 for program activities. The remainder of the budget comes in 2 areas, general and administrative, and lastly, reserve. Briefly on general and administrative, this is covering activities such as salary and benefits, for me, the one full-time executive director, payroll tax expense, contract services for both a bookkeeper and an auditor, as we're required to have, rent, utilities, office equipment and supplies, travel and meetings. I point out that we have the Main Street Now conference that'll be in Birmingham, Alabama, May 4th to 6th to 8th, that we hope to take a group to next year. Also board development activities, very important. We have a line item for that. Insurance, dues and membership, software, printing, shipping, bank fees, and finally miscellaneous, all told $180,282. Last but not least is the reserve. Typically, a CID is encouraged to set aside 5% of total revenue to a reserve. We're suggesting slightly lower than that for this year of 3.8%. What that translates into is $13,968. There's some years when we're going to be able to contribute more to the reserve, but for this year, that was the level that seemed right. And I want to emphasize that We are fortunate to be able to be carrying over funds from our prior fiscal year to this one, which will give us the stability of a more established organization, despite the fact that we're relatively new. So with that, I'm pleased to present our budget for $367,000, the funds to offset that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Isaac. Okay, any questions from the council members? Eve?
I kind of have a speculative question. So there's a lot of things that are coming online in the next year or two, Graduate Hotel, Alice Project, Thanet, all those developments. Where do you see, if you can guesstimate the budget going, and what do you anticipate using that excess money for? If it's only going to be $2,000, then I withdraw the question, but I'm assuming it's going to be more substantial. So just sort of your wish list based on that additional income.
I really appreciate the question. And for those who have looked at the board packet, as I know, the council packet, as I know many of you have, there's 354 unique block and lots mentioned in the packet. That translates to about 263 SID owners, owners within the district, that is, with the understanding that some owners have multiple blocks and lots. What that means is that $367,000 spread out across 263 or 354. Some could be paying a very small amount, but as you mentioned, as new properties are completed and they come into the pipeline, that will mean additional revenues. And I think really the way to answer that is that the teams, together with the board, are going to decide how best to allocate those additional funds. So in addition to the budgeting process, we also have a work planning process. And we're looking a year out about different things that we should prioritize. Just a few things to highlight in this upcoming year in the work planning process were that increase of funding for plantings and public art, continuing to work on the decorations, the Shop Local campaign and the gift card that we're looking to launch. It's really a very innovative model where we have the ability to even match dollar for dollar funds that people buy on these gift cards to encourage them to shop local, only in businesses that are here. And, really at the heart of our program is attracting and retaining volunteers. So anything that we can do to create a great experience for those volunteers and bring in that additional activity will be helpful. And I'll just anecdotally share with you, we're at a point right now where we just surpassed 50 volunteers. So Michelle in her comments, Councilwoman Lambros mentioned that we have the 17 board members, but then think that we have another 33 volunteers on all of our different teams on top of that. As we grow that, we're going to be able to do more. And I'd really put out there that each new volunteer comes in gives us the ability to add to the work of our program. So it's a very exciting time, and that's just a snapshot of a few of the things we're working on, but I anticipate our best ideas are yet ahead.
Mia?
Isaac, just, it's not in what you submitted, but you mentioned three things at the beginning, and they're the three things that I'm most concerned about. I think, so it was ordinances, wayfinding, signage, master plan. I think, were those the three, or was that how you grouped it?
Sure, council member. I believe under the economic development team, I referred to three topics, the first being traffic, parking, and wayfinding. The second, allowable uses. And third, the master plan process. And related to that was the ordinances.
Okay. These are really critical to your mission. I can't underscore that enough. And it would be great to have a detailed work plan. Those are massive areas, each one of those. The master plan, as you know, will be wrapping up pretty soon, so whatever input the SID needs, wants, feels is important to provide, now is the time. So, and I think allowable uses may overlap, but for these three topics, I urge you to communicate vigorously with our staff and with us and through our liaisons in whatever form, but time is really of essence for these three, and the rest of the stuff that the city is involved with is lovely, but it's the icing on the cake. Like, if our city is going to make a difference in this town, those three those three items that you mentioned are really critical, and it's what we need to see real progress on very, very soon. So.
Excellent. I just underscore your comments and say I totally agree. And the way that we get to economic vitality, it really is through working each of the 4 points that we think about, which are civic, physical, social, and economic. But I think to your point, especially, if we're going to achieve economic vitality, it's really through the work of that economic development team especially. And I'd offer to you that I think our recent experience working with staff on the outdoor dining ordinance, as an example, is we were able to rapidly pull together the information that informed the policy, and hopefully that we'll have a good outcome to show for that shortly. And whether you agree with that point or not, that moving forward, I hope that'll characterize our relationship and our work on other projects. But we do value the public-private partnership that's at the heart of this work, and we'll continue to come to the table and work collaboratively with staff, but also mayor and council.
So I would just add that I think how the outdoor dining ordinance shaped up is an example of how we don't want to proceed going forward. That's sort of not what we want to aspire to in terms of a smooth and effective process. So maybe we can use that as a learning experience and move on from that.
I'll accept that point. Thank you.
Okay.
Leighton.
Thank you. First, I just want to, congratulate you. You have a huge job and a major responsibility taking this town forward with regard to the Special Improvement District. My question, sir, is you mentioned where the monies are coming from with regard to the budget. There are a great many commercial entities here, some people that own maybe a commercial building with 4 to 6 units in it. Can you distinguish, if you can, and I'm not trying to give you a trick question, how will those individuals who are just property owners and not businesses benefit from the monies that they're putting forward into this SID budget?
Sure. So I think a lot of it, and thank you for the question. So the question is, how do the property owners benefit? And especially thinking about that mid-scale or even the smaller scale property owners. And I think the best way that I can answer that is that whatever we do, that we're trying to think of all of our members. And as I shared earlier, we have 263 property owners, unique property owners in the district. And we always want to align interest, and we want to be able to advocate effectively on behalf of them. So to give an example, as we were going through the outdoor dining process, that we were both working with businesses, but remember that the property owners had to sign off on that too. So it was an interesting process by which we were talking with the businesses, getting the support of the owners, and bringing through applications. And one of the first ones to be approved for Mamoons, that owner actually owned the building that both Mamoons and Jules are in, so we were able to help both of them. As I get out and about in the district, I'm trying to meet as many of these owners as possible and really instill that we're just one call away, that we're available as a resource, and we want to be able to advocate on their behalf. I'll give another example that we've had some litter issues in the Dome Alley area. So just last week that I was working with the owner representative there, doing an on-site meeting and trying to advocate. In the course of that process, we learned they have 83 other properties that they manage. So we established that relationship, and hopefully it'll have benefit across that entire portfolio. So, and one last point that I'd make, and I hope you don't mind if I mention that we had a very productive meeting about 2.5 weeks ago, but we were talking with a local retailer about the retail mix and how they would really like to see more retail coming into Princeton. And really at the heart of that is having great relationships with the property owners so that we can help make the case of, let's try to get these uses here and get the right businesses close together so that we get that kind of cluster economy effect and create an environment in which retail can be successful. So there's no silver bullet, but really at the heart of all our work is having great relationships, including with the property owners, and we'll strive to continue to do more of that.
Thanks, Isaac, and thanks for all the work you're doing.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Michelle.
Sorry. I just want to add to that because Leighton brings up a good point that we've discussed often is the residential small property owners. I mean, how do the residential property owners benefit? And, you know, it's all, what is it? The rising tide floats all boats? I mean, whatever it is. Thank you. Yeah. You know what I'm trying to say. It's already getting late. It's really important that the economic vitality is increased across the board, and that attracts residents. It attracts people to want to live here, and we hear that all the time. The mix of tenants and retail tenants needs to be sensitive to the needs of the residents. So at the end of the day, this is really going to benefit the residents, and that benefits the small and medium-sized residential community. So just to put a point on that. Thanks for bringing it up, Leighton. And thank you,
Michelle.
Isaac.
Any other questions or comments? Isaac, anything else you wanted to say?
It's been an education for the first year. I'm really excited, you know, the way that we set this up, that, you know, I'm really pleased to share with you tonight that I'm seeing both our board and our teams coalescing as we go into our board meeting next month, that we do have a work plan that we're bringing forward to the board that's going to guide our work in the next year. And both our chairman, who couldn't be here tonight, Aubrey Haynes, who had a personal reason, he very much wanted to be here, but I think we're optimistic about the future of Princeton, and I believe we have the right people in the right places to get results. So I think if you wanted to characterize the first year, a lot of it was setting up, you know, getting up to speed, knowing our members, and trying to figure out, you know, exactly where we wanted to go with different things. This year is going to be about execution. It's going to be about results. So when we come back to you a year from now, hopefully we'll be able to list off those results and say, we came to you, said we were going to do X, Y, and Z, and we did all of those things, plus hopefully a bunch more. So with that, thank you, and I look forward to the year ahead.
Thank you, Isaac. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Isaac, I just want to say, if anyone understands how rough this town is, it's everyone sitting up here. So we congratulate you on surviving 1 year in Princeton. Well done.
Well, after the recognitions tonight, 1 year does feel like a lifetime.
No doubt.
But I have to say, my enthusiasm and optimism for Princeton is stronger than when I started. And I appreciate the experience.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, Isaac.
Nice.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, this is a roll call vote, I believe. Yes, it is.
You want to open the public hearing? See if
I'm
there's
sorry?
any public comment?
Oh,
From
thank
Zoom.
you for saving me once again. Right. Anybody in the room that wishes to speak about this? All right, seeing none. The aforementioned Aubrey Haynes is actually on Zoom. Adam, can you bring Aubrey in? And Aubrey and others that might want to talk again, just if you state your name and address before you start. Thank you.
Hi, it's Aubrey Haynes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Hi, everybody. It's Aubrey Haynes. I'm the president of the Experience Princeton, the Special Improvement District. Just wanted to say thank you to you, Mayor, and to Michelle, and to the other board members who've served so diligently and spent lots of their time, as well as the volunteers. There's been a lot of progress made in the first year, although a lot of the effort was really focused on organizing the entity. And I think the second year of our existence is going to be really productive and successful. There are going to be a lot of things that will be visible to the people who live in Princeton that will make them feel even better about the best town in New Jersey, and maybe the best town in the United States. So thank you for your time, and look forward to working with you and making this a real success for the town.
Thank you, Aubrey. Okay, Adam, there was another hand up.
Hello, can anyone hear me? Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey. I wanted to speak earlier on Dr. Shanley's presentation. Yeah. Oh, lower my hand. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I wanted to speak on Dr. Shanley's presentation.
Hey, Aubrey,
As
excuse me, Jeffrey, we're in the middle of a public hearing on this item, so we have to stick to discussion on this item at the moment. We can try to come back to you. We can try to come back to you later. We'll just see how the rest of the meeting goes.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Sorry about that. All right. Anyone else on Zoom that wanted to talk to this topic? All right, seeing no other hands up, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a roll call vote.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next up is 23241, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton accepting the assessment role of the 2023-2024 Special Improvement District of the Municipality of Princeton. Michelle's got the motion, and Leighton's got the second. Any council comments or questions? Okay. I'm sorry. The next item. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, no council. Isaac, you don't need to say anything on this at this point? Okay. Anybody in the room want to say anything on this one? Anybody on Zoom? All right, seeing no one. We have a roll call vote.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Yes.
Thank you. Now we finally get to our work session, and I believe we have folks that have been waiting patiently for that. So, Deanna, are you kicking us off, or?
Yes, we have members of Arterial here tonight with us for a work session on the Nassau streetscape concept ideas. Joining us tonight from Arterial is Dave Lusberg, CEO, James Roboto, and Lexi Smaldone. And they will be giving a presentation as to the process that they have undertaken to create some concepts for Nassau, and then go through the ideas that are the basis for their recommendations and reports. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave and James.
That'll stay on. Good.
It's just going to be important that you speak into the microphone, because that, if not, the people on Zoom will never know what you're saying. Thanks.
Is that good?
You're good.
All righty. Good? Closer? Let's do this. All right, how's that? Good? All right, thank you very much. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for your time tonight. My name is Dave Lusberg. I'm CEO and managing principal at Arterial. With me tonight is James Roboto, my business partner, director of design, and also project manager Lexi Smaldone. So over the past 6 months, we've worked very hard to really build a concept design for the Nassau streetscape. And we worked very closely, really led by the engineering department, Councilwoman Pearl-Lambros, members of the planning department, members of the Historic Preservation Commission, of course Isaac and the Special Improvement District, and most importantly the stakeholders and members of the public. We're very excited to present that plan to you tonight, and we're looking forward to the discussion. So first, I'm just going to take you through quickly a little bit about our approach to streetscape design, and then I'm going to pass it over to James, and he's going to take you through the design. So you can go ahead. Oh, you want me to do it? Okay. All right, so as I started to say, so Arterial is a street design studio. So that means we're an urban design and landscape architecture firm, but we specialize in the design of streets. So our process, we start with a capital improvement plan, and that's where we are today with Nassau Street Streetscape. Next, we move on to schematic design, which is where we get much more detailed about the design and work out all of the nuts and bolts. And then finally, we get to implementation and construction. And the reason why I like to point this out is because we're not a planning firm or a design firm that prepares a design up front and then hands it off. We make sure that we stay with you from start to finish until the last tree is in the ground and the sidewalk is swept to ensure that the design is executed according to the vision set forth by the town. So when we're designing streets, we really start with two key factors. First are the priorities, and second is the performance. So the priorities discuss how the right-of-way is used, so what uses we're prioritizing within the right-of-way. Next, we talk about the performance, which is really the detailed design measures. And one of the most important things about these two categories, the priorities really should be determined by the community. So how do we want to prioritize the different uses in that street? The performance is then developed by the professionals in coordination with the community. So when we talk about priorities, we think about a scale, right? So if you see this scale here, far right is car first, and far left is place first. And none of these are right or wrong. It's just that we want to make conscious decisions about what we're prioritizing for a particular street. So, for example, a car first street might look something like this, right? So 2 lanes in each direction, reasonable sidewalks. We can take that arrow and push it to the left, and we lose a lane of traffic. We introduce bike lanes. We introduce some additional landscape. If we take that arrow and we push it even further to the left, now those bike lanes become protected. The sidewalks get a little bit wider, and it starts to shift more towards the pedestrian and the cyclist. We can take that arrow and push it even further to the left, and this is really where a main street should sit, right? So now we have nice wide sidewalks, narrower lanes. The bicycle lane you can see is at the sidewalk level, protected from traffic. And then we could take that arrow and push it all the way to the left, and we have a shared street. And this one actually might look a little bit familiar to many of you because this is very similar to the decision you made for Witherspoon Street, right? You decided to take that arrow and push it all the way to the left. So once we set that priority, next we want to think about the performance. So when we're talking about performance, first we think about functionality. We want to make sure that the street operates the way it's supposed to. Next, arts and culture. Does it represent Princeton, right? So are the materials, the furnishings, et cetera, distinctly Princeton? Health and the environment, we want it to be sustainable. Economic vitality, and this was, Isaac was touching on this as well. We want to make sure that the street functions in a way that supports the local businesses and the local business community. And finally, design quality. And design quality is not about the subjective part of design, whether we like it or not. It's more about the quality of the materials and the quality of the design, right? So we want to make sure that the capital improvement money or the grant money that's spent up front, that 5 years, 10 years down the line, you're not saddled with maintenance costs repairing that street. We want to make sure that it's designed to stand the test of time. So a couple quick project examples that we've selected, just a couple of images for you, and these were selected for a particular reason. These demonstrate different concepts. The first one is Main Street in Millburn. The second one is Stuyvesant Avenue in Union. So if we look at Main Street in Millburn, this is the before image, 4 lanes of traffic. So they decided to eliminate a lane of traffic and widen the sidewalks. And today it looks like this. So there's a couple of things I want to point out in this image that are relevant to this project as James is going to present. So first we look at the corners. And so you can see how the corners, they look beautiful. I'm not patting us on the back here. They're nice corners, but they're put together in a way that is functional, right? It provides a large gathering space, but it also protects the pedestrian. So you can see that those nice landscape beds are aesthetic, but they also funnel the pedestrian into the crosswalk. So a pedestrian can't step off into a live travel lane here. So they serve multiple purposes. And then if we look a little bit closer at those corners, you'll notice the materials, and this is when we talk about design quality, right? So you'll notice that in the foreground, it's concrete, but at the corner, it's a higher quality material, it's granite. So corners are the places where most people gather, right? So that's where we stop, we make decisions, we meet friends at corners. So that's where we tend to use a little bit of a higher quality material and spend a little bit more of the budget into those corners and keep the mid-blocks a little bit more simple. Now, if we look at Stuyvesant Avenue in Union, that was the before. Here's the after. Now, a couple things I want to point out here. Number one is the paving pattern, right? So you can see this concrete paving pattern. This is called a flag pattern. So this is a very traditional staggered flag pattern that can look sort of like large pavers. The other thing I want to point out in this image are the benches. So these benches are what we refer to as cube benches. So they're single seat benches. And the nice thing about benches like this are that you can sit forward, but you can also turn and sit sideways. You can use one bench as your table and one bench as your seat. You can face the street. You can face multiple directions. So the reason we're showing you this is because on streetscapes, it's very important to provide a variety of seating, not just to have seating, but the way that it's selected and the way that it's clustered. So again, another image of that with the cube seating tucked in. And then finally, we just wanted to highlight one of the features on this streetscape is that we utilized engraved granite bands. So built into the pavement in selective locations, they decided to engrave, this is a historic corridor, so they decided to engrave certain historic events into granite pavers and locate those throughout the street. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to James, and he'll take you through the design.
All right, thanks, Dave. So I plan on getting through the next part as quickly as I can, give or take 10 minutes. And basically, we're going to walk through the concept design for Nassau Street, which, as you can see from the map on the screen, the project area extends from Bayard Lane to Moore Street along the northwest side of the corridor. So here we are in the project timeline. As Dave mentioned, the process that we're in, July 2023, we're presenting the concept before you all this evening. And this is really a continuation of the work that has been ongoing for Nassau Street, from the design guidelines that were put in place through a test implementation and subsequent design refinement process that included a series of public outreach meetings. So if found acceptable, the final schematic design is planned for around September. And then after that, subject to capital funding, state permitting, that kind of thing, construction is anticipated late 2024 to 2025. And an important step before undertaking any design concepts for us is to really meet with various groups and members of the public to listen to concerns or issues that exist with the current condition of the street. We always go into a place not pretending to know it and to be the experts, but that is the people that we're talking to, the stakeholders, the public, the members of the community. And really this helps inform us as to the issues that are there. And then we also like to ask, what are your future aspirations to, better the street, to make a place that is inviting for everyone? And that really is an important part of our process. So once we met with a number of stakeholders that range from business and property owners to municipal staff, elected, appointed officials, the university, we began to develop concepts based on their feedback. We then presented this at a public open house that was held in the library on June 14th, which is that middle picture. And immediately following, the municipality put out an online survey where we collected approximately or over 200 responses based on those design concepts. So not only did we get feedback that evening, we had a great turnout, but we also collected a number of responses online. And again, as I mentioned, prior to design, we met with the folks up on the screen here, and we have begun to follow up with SHPO, which is currently reviewing the design material that we have submitted, which we're presenting this evening. And DOT is obviously an important one to engage, but at this point, it's really a little premature. The design needs to be a little bit further vetted for them to kind of really comment on and get their involvement in. So after a number of conversations, the following feedback really rose to the surface, and we tried to capture it in 3 different words. This is a historic corridor, and the materials selected should reflect that. The design itself should stand the test of time and not go out of style, so to speak, in the next couple of years. And then finally, this corridor is an important community gathering place, which the design should reflect and allow flexibility for the various things that happen along the corridor. So getting into the materials, first, the overall approach was to utilize authentic materials that have been around and proven to stand the test of time. So the majority of the sidewalk would be concrete, which you could see in the upper left image there, with some tint or special finish, such as an exposed aggregate. And the real purpose of that is to provide a texture to enhance the pedestrian experience. We understand that the finish is highly important, so we're still vetting this with the engineering department to make sure that they're comfortable with the maintenance of it, the long-term durability of it. We're recommending granite pavers to be used as highlights along the blocks and at the corners. Again, a historic material that you find around Princeton, trying to better take elements that are around town and provide a cohesive palette. Introducing a 12-inch granite curb along the length of the street, which you'll see in the upper right. Utilizing 4x4, 4-inch by 4-inch granite sets, which you can see in the lower left. The picture on the right there of the granite paver highlights is a 6-inch granite planter curb, which is appropriate for tree pits. And a lot of these things I'm mentioning right now, we're going to look at how they get organized on the street in a couple minutes. And then finally, on the right, bottom right, engraved granite bands. And we understand that the 250th anniversary is coming up, so this could be one of the ways to commemorate various time frames, people, events, important dates, that kind of thing. Okay, moving to the furniture palette. So the furniture palette looks to provide a bit of a more sophisticated and flexible look at the way the furniture is situated along the street. So as Dave mentioned, the bottom images here, we're showing 3 benches, all in the same family, but distinctly different in the sense that one is backed, and that is really useful for situations where you want to encourage people to hang out a little bit longer. A lot of times, some of the older folks, having the back bench makes it more comfortable. So depending on where those locations are, we want to use a back. Backless bench is helpful for places where we want flexibility to face in towards the storefront or out towards the street. And then the cube bench, as Dave mentioned, to give flexibility for social configurations, using it as a table to put your food on, that kind of thing. But using the combination of those benches really allows for flexibility and to create these sort of social spaces that really encourage and foster people to get together. That sort of intergenerational mix that was being talked about earlier can happen on the street. It's where people meet and talk. And then just the material itself is a thermally modified ash, which is a sustainable hardwood. So that's important as well. Simple inverted U bike racks, which you can see in the upper left for areas where we want bike racks. I know that the municipality is using a lot of the bike corrals, so this is sort of in addition to that, where you might not be able to get so many parked bicycles on the sidewalk. A trash receptacle that matches the benches, and then using the concrete planters that are out on Witherspoon for seasonal color in appropriate places. So this is a picture that we added in, so it might not be in the packet that you have, but we thought we might want to look at what the street looks like now before looking at the sort of after, the rendering. And again, renderings, it's hard to create them exactly the way they would be, but we have tried our best. So you see this location is on the left. You see the diner sign, which kind of helps orient you where you are. You're looking towards Witherspoon Street. In the sort of upper right above the white van, is the Nassau Gate, a little bit covered up, but you can see that intersection. So now as we look at this image, what we see are those elements that we just looked at composed along the street. So this, again, what we're looking at is the main walking surface being a tinted textured concrete with clean saw-cut joints in a flag pattern that Dave mentioned, which is a historic pattern, but a little bit cleaner and a little bit more of a modern approach with the saw-cut joints. Granite pavers along the facades of the building on the left, and then also along the curb line on the right. And then in areas like this where we can create some seating pockets around trees, we can use that highlight material as well. Yeah, I don't think the mouse works to show up there, unfortunately. And again, the benches can be arranged in a number of different configurations. This is one of them. You saw the 3. We can arrange them in many different ways. Now, taking a look at the sidewalks, where the widths are greater or less, we would approach the tree pits in two different ways. So both would be about 6 foot by 6 foot. And in the areas where the sidewalk is more expansive, we would introduce a 6-inch granite curb around the tree pit to help protect the tree pit, to keep people from walking over it. One of the biggest enemies to trees are compaction in a downtown area. So in areas, though, where the sidewalks are more narrow and don't allow that, and you need it for walking surface, we would propose a flush granite band that, again, can be engraved. It could be utilized, as we mentioned before, to commemorate important events, dates, peoples, that kind of thing. Also using flush permeable granite sets that provide additional walking surface where necessary, and this doesn't inhibit the amount of water entering the tree pit, which is also important. So you don't want to get that tree pit so small where it just doesn't get water in, it doesn't contribute to the success of the tree. So finally, one of the most important things happens below the surface and we don't see it, but it contributes to the success of the tree, and that is we're recommending a modular suspended pavement system to minimize compaction and potential heaving by encouraging root growth in a larger area beneath the sidewalk. So typically what happens is, you put soil underneath of concrete, it gets compacted, the roots can't grow out the way they should, they then heave the sidewalk, the roots girdle, and you unfortunately have a tree that doesn't last its full life cycle. This system helps encourage that compaction to be minimized and really keeps that soil loose so that the tree roots can grow through it, it can get air and all those things that it needs to be successful. All right, so then our next view, we're now flipping on the other side of Witherspoon. So we're standing, you could see the jeweler on the right, Witherspoon Street is directly in front of us, and you can see what it looks like today. And this is showing what these elements composed together could, again, look like. So you see the concrete, the flag pattern, you see the granite paver highlights on the right along the facade of the building. Then on the left, you see that granite band and a little bit of enlargement in the circle there along the curb line. And that really is used to connect these corners and to bring that cohesive palette throughout the length of the streetscape. The bump outs on the left serve as reduction in the crossing distance for pedestrian safety, but also allows a great place to plant and to get more green infrastructure, more green in town, give trees a better place to be successful. What's that? Yeah, so I don't know how I'm supposed to point out the curb from down here, but it's right behind the benches. So that's the curb line where you can see the bump out. The curb itself in darker gray, you could see that larger kind of 12-inch, more stately granite curb there. And then another little highlight here is you can see the arrows to the left of that circle, and we're showing an ideal situation where we would table this intersection. So bring it to the sidewalk level to really raise the priority of the pedestrian here so that you would have that crossing be at the sidewalk level so that cars would have to actually go up onto it. So it causes them to slow down, gives priority to pedestrian, and of course would be subject to DOT review and approval. And then we're going to kind of pop up for a bird's eye aerial of Witherspoon so that you can see the tabled intersection, the bump outs, the sidewalk treatment. And really we want to hang on this slide just for a couple minutes to talk about some numbers. So we were initially given a budgetary range for this corridor of about $5 to $6 million. The improvements we just walked through, though they're still conceptual, we've put some numbers together. It really is an order of magnitude, a ballpark. But we are looking at a high level of finish to the concrete. We're looking at granite paver highlights, which again is a very rich material, and it is approximately $750,000 per block. So if you multiply that out over the 7 blocks, we're in the range of that $5 to $6 million budget. And we look at this as more of a sort of high end, a top end to that budget. So if we then look at, for comparison purposes, a little bit of a lesser finish on the concrete, we could remove the granite paver highlights. We would be more at about $550,000 per block. So multiply that out by 7, and you're at roughly $4 million. So we would kind of consider that maybe a bottom end where you just have a nicer concrete without any paver highlights. So we just want to do that to show that there's a range. There's a top end, there's a bit of a bottom end, and there's a range in between. All right, so moving along here, we just have a couple slides left.
I
As
like the
part
more
of-
expensive one.
What's that? So as part of our scope, we were also asked to look at the cross-section of Nassau Street to see how bicycles and scooters could be accommodated. So looking at Nassau Street, roughly between Washington Street to Mercer Street can accommodate a two-way cycle track on the northwestern portion of the street. And that really spans a large part of the commercial corridor, not the entire thing, but a large part. And this really collects users from the side streets. It allocates space for cyclists and scooters so that they are not on the sidewalks or in the street. And then both the engineering department and university has informed us that there are future connections in the works on some other streets here that could act as bookends to this bike lane here. So just quickly flashing a few images meant to show you what a two-way raised cycle track could look like. So the one on the left is the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. They use pavers for that bike lane, but it's also part of the sidewalk. It's raised, so you can see what that looks like on the left. On the right are two examples where a combination of asphalt and pavers are used. And looking at some numbers from studies and data pulled from Bloomberg, Streets Blog, Portland State University, there are a number of benefits that you can get out of bike lanes. So just quickly, increased shopping. Cyclists are more likely to stop and enter a business than drivers are. Property values. Installing bicycle lanes along corridors is correlated to an increase in property values. And then safety. Bicycle lanes improve safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. So all of that kind of works together to create a safe environment that still has that economic vitality in mind that Dave was mentioning in the beginning. So moving along, this is a section of the current allocation of space within the curb line. So you see that there are two 8-foot parallel parking spaces, two 13-foot travel lanes, except for obviously the blocks where it expands and becomes two travel lanes, and then a center turn lane. So all in all, that's 54 feet of space that you have in between the curbs. So if we shift some things around, we keep the parallel parking on both sides, we remove the center turn lane, and we reduce the travel lane widths, we can introduce this two-way cycle track at the sidewalk level that you see on the right, roughly 10 feet with a 3-foot buffer, so that's 13 feet. So you can see how that 54 feet can be reallocated to accommodate bicycles at the sidewalk level. And then this is just a vignette that shows what that could look like. That orange dashed line that you see in between the bike lane and the sidewalk is the existing curb line. So this does not eat into the existing sidewalk space, but also an important thing to note is because the space is coming from some of that center turn lane and from the travel lanes, the parking also is not affected. So we would, and again, we didn't look at the entire corridor, but we would imagine that based on the allocation of space here, the parking loss would be minimum, if any spaces at all. And we love to be straightforward and transparent when discussing these things, right? So looking at this is a big impact, right? This could be transformative. Whether you look at that as a positive or negative, it would be a very transformative, significant impact to have this two-way cycle track. So there's a number of things to consider. And we listed them out here, some of the things that we were talking about. NJDOT review and approval, obviously very important. The roadway crown would have to be looked at because extending the sidewalk out, it would have to be changed because of drainage, which is the next one. Roadway drainage would have to also be addressed. Signalized all pedestrian phase intersections, putting a two-way cycle track on one side of the street, you'd have to look at some kind of infrastructure when it comes to signalization, potentially for the bikes themselves, a separate system. Non-signalized intersections, pedestrian safety and crossings. Somebody may not be aware that there's a bike coming the opposite way, so there's all these things to take into account. Construction costs and implementation, the transition connections at the east and west end. So we want to make sure that we're upfront on it looks like it's a nice idea and simple, but there's a lot of things to consider when you go into looking at the bike lanes. And then finally, The design concepts that we shared this evening, so everything that we looked at this evening, we presented at the public open house. And then we followed that up with an online survey to collect the feedback. And overall, the responses that we received were very positive. And we just want to quickly highlight some of that. So 65% of survey respondents feel that the streetscape concept design is appropriate for Nassau Street. So that's that first box there. And interesting to note here is that only 10% disagreed with that. So there was a large number of kind of neutral. So only 10% disagreed, so a large majority on the positive end of things there. 85% of survey respondents felt that the furniture and materials palette was appropriate for Nassau Street. And then lastly, 63% of survey respondents support the two-way cycle track on the north side of Nassau Street. We had roughly, what did I put in here? The number, 63%. Doing math really quick in my head, 18, so 25-ish percent were in the negative, which disagreed, and a large portion of that were potentially due to the thought of loss of parking. Obviously, parking is a big deal, so that may have impacted that number a little bit. So something to just consider as we look through the comments that we received. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
David, you were pretty quick.
Thanks, Mark. I have a couple of questions. Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for answering some of my questions before I asked them. For instance, about the raised curb around the planting beds. You know, one of the things we're really trying to do is green infrastructure and be able to have runoff into our planting beds, but I understand after you explained it, the reason for where you would propose having it be raised. I did, though, have a question. You know, we had on our Witherspoon Street redesign the idea of root barriers come up sort of after the fact to keep the tree roots from causing the sidewalk to heave. And you're talking about encouraging the tree roots to go under the sidewalk. And I just would like to hear a little more about the suspended paver system that you're talking about and how that prevents the kinds of problems that you can get with sidewalk heave and tree roots. I don't know if you want me to do all my questions at once and you can answer, or do you want me to take them one at a time?
Well, go through them all at once. We'll try and log them, and then if we miss them, you'll just tell us that we missed one.
Okay. Yeah, this one is really more of a comment, but I think the idea of a raised table at Witherspoon and Nassau, well, I love it. I can't believe it wasn't already discussed with DOT. They just rebuilt that intersection, so don't get people's hopes up too much as you present that, because I think it's a long shot. The section, the road section, when you have the cycle track, I thought I heard you talking about a center turn lane, but the road section looked to me like it just had 2 lanes of parking and 2 lanes of traffic and no center turn lane. So if you can just clarify whether or not there's a center turn lane. And I think a center turn lane is kind of important on Nassau Street in this section. So hopefully there's some way to make, I mean, I'm definitely supportive of the idea of the bicycle accommodations. But just as a final comment, I'm concerned about the way that the cycle track, the extent of it is rendered right now, because it looks like it goes from access point at University to an access point from Washington Road. And I can tell you, you're going to get a strong reaction from this community is why are we building a cycle accommodation that only serves the university and doesn't serve our residents? And you need to figure out how people are going to get onto that cycle track from the north side of Nassau Street. That's all I got.
Yeah, all right. So we'll
I
tag
just want
team
to say,
vote.
David,
Go
I
ahead.
think
I'm sorry, should we let them answer?
it's something that they can't answer to his last question about the university. I mean, I think there's some, I'm not sure that it would be, the funding would entirely be on the municipality. I think there's some room for discussion there. So.
I was talking more about the way it was presented than the way it was designed. Right now, the drawing shows it mainly with connections from Nassau Street into the university, and that's not a good look.
All right, so the first thing was the modular suspended pavement system. So basically what that does is it looks to create essentially an area beneath the sidewalk that isn't going to get compacted. So if I were to describe it, it's almost like pillars, right, that go from a compacted subgrade to the sidewalk. And then that creates, the strength of those pillars then creates void that you can put soil. And that soil then is not going to get compacted over the years. And so, here we're saying, it could be an area like 10 by 10, that your roots then have an option, a chance to grow out. When they don't get that, so let's just say you have 6 by 6 pits, and all of the soil around that is compacted, it's just underneath the sidewalk. So those roots will go, and then they hit that kind of, and then they heave up, right? So if you allow them some more space, then you won't get that.
Is the soil actually recessed below the pavers? Like, is there an airspace?
Yeah, basically, it's not, so the soil doesn't get compacted. So it creates those voids in the soils to allow the roots to grow. Now, you can use that in combination with a root barrier if you want to control kind of at the ends of those that you don't want it to go past there. You can actually create extra depth, so you can go down deeper if you want to encourage those roots to go down deeper. So there's some options that you get with that system, but really the idea is that it gives you really an area where the tree is allowed to kind of do what the tree wants to do versus when we constrict it and then we deal with the results of heaving sidewalks and trees girdling and then not lasting as long as they should. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I can just go to the, no?
I think that.
Okay. Understood about the tabled intersection. So some of that was sort of presenting from our standpoint what ideally could happen, and then we go from there, right? And with DOT, that's especially important. You never want to aim mid-level with them. You always want to aim as high as you can because you're going to be peeling back some of the layers of the onion there. The center turn lane. So in order to get the space for the two-way cycle track and not affect parking, we were now this is without traffic studies and all that kind of stuff. We were just looking at space. You would need to take the center turn lane or that center median striped, wherever it might be, take it and reallocate it for the two-way cycle track. So again, we haven't looked at traffic studies and all those things to determine whether or not that's a feasible thing. But just from an allocation standpoint, that's how we would get that two-way cycle track. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I was just going to add to, I just want to be upfront about the cycle track and where we are with it, right? So our scope as part of this exercise, the primary scope was on the sidewalk redesign. The secondary scope was looking at what we can do curb to curb to accommodate bicycles, right? So at this point, that as simple as that may look in a rendering, that's a very complicated cycle track to implement. And so really at this point, it's conceptual, and it's just saying, hey, this is what can fit here. In order to take it to the next step, if everyone is interested in doing that, then you start to dig in more of the nuts and bolts and get a better understanding of what it actually means to implement something like that. So I just wanted to be upfront about that. There's not nearly the level of detail in that cycle track as there is in the design of the sidewalk today.
And I guess to add to that's also part of the reasoning for where the extents are shown. So that two-way cycle track can fit from, I think we said Mercer to Washington.
Can you pull the map back?
Yeah. Right, so this graphic, the street section itself, the cross section changes when you get beyond those 2 points, and at that point, any kind of bicycle facility would be different. So whether that's on road, sharrows, whatever that might be, it would be a different accommodation, yeah, different facility.
Eve.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a big question, which you have acknowledged, and then go just to some smaller, more detailed questions. So I don't know, I mean, you mentioned one of the pictures you showed was of a main street in another community, but, you know, as you very clearly stated, you know, Route 206, which is Nassau Street, is a major, you know, I don't know technically if it's an arterial. Deanna can tell me what the technical term is, but I mean, it's a major state road. So I'm wondering, you know, focusing now on the street rather than the sidewalk, although I know, you know, we might need DOT input into some of the sidewalk issues as well, but focusing on the street, I guess a few questions. I mean, to jump in for David's question, another option is to remove a lane of parking rather than the center turn lane. But in a more general sense, have you ever worked with DOT on a project like this? Okay, I see nods, that's good. And to me, it seems so unlikely that this, you know, their goal is to move cars. Our goal is to create, you know, a beautiful community and, you know, a space, as you said. How does that get reconciled, and what do you do in working with DOT and SHPO to get them to move from, you know, get from point A to point B as fast as possible to create this wonderful kind of environment? So, and then I'll throw in my smaller questions. Thanks.
So the short answer to the first part of the question is yes, we have done streetscape projects on state highways working with DOT. It is never fun and it's never easy, but it takes a lot of persistence, and you know, oftentimes you get different answers at different times, and it you know, we're not sugarcoating that it's a challenging proposition, right? But we have found that more and more they're open to newer ideas, right? As like these different complete streets ideas ranging from bicycle lanes to traffic calming are becoming more and more common, and there's more precedent for it, they're becoming more and more open to it. So we have gotten things like where they never would approve a bump out. We've gotten bump outs in where they've never approved, you know, areas of, you know, traffic calming using paint and things like this. We've gotten those through. So it's possible, but you never know until you're at that point, right? So like James said, we aim high and we go in with data, you know, and you have to be, you know, you have to have your ducks in a row and have all the numbers right, and push hard, you know, and steady hand at the wheel. And that's you know, there's no sort of simpler answer than that. You know, it's a lift. In terms of the sidewalk area, all of that we're fairly confident about. The bicycle lanes are definitely a reach, you know, there's no doubt about it, but it's also transformative for Princeton, right? So that's a decision.
Okay, and the follow-up question, so the number you cited of the cost did not include anything to do with adding in the
That's
bicycle
right.
lanes? Okay,
That's
it would be interesting, it would
Yes.
be actually, not interesting, let's say vital, to have some vague idea of what that would be, and also if you have any ideas based on previous work as to what part of that might get covered by the state, or, I mean, it is their road. So if that could be something that you could give us at least some back of the envelope figures. I don't know if that's really included in your scope of project, but whatever you can do that could be done in some kind of rough fashion would be helpful.
Yeah, and we actually had this discussion as a group, you know, before this, and it is without actually beginning to develop that bicycle lane to the level that we're looking at the sidewalk. There, it's you know, it's shooting in the dark because there are so many things associated with that, as James mentioned, ranging from at the top end, traffic signals and things like that, utilities, grading, working all the way down. So you really have to look block by block and see what you're running into. Otherwise, there is no, like, it costs this much here, so that's how much it's going to cost here, because anyone who works in this environment in streets knows that, you put a shovel in the ground and you don't know what you're going to find. So when you're widening a curb into the street, it's the same situation. So we're happy to work with Deanna and the team here to put some numbers together, but it's going to take a little bit more investigation for sure.
Well, it'll be scary.
Okay, yeah. Okay. No, that's what I'm thinking. If just doing the sidewalk is 400 to 600,000 a block. So here are you talked a little bit about. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm misinterpreting it. What you're doing around some of the trees, is that like a permeable paver, or it's the understructure that's permeable? The question that David asked about follow-up about the tree planting areas. Are those permeable pavers in there, or it's just?
So we were, and I'm just thumbing through here. You see the image in the bottom left, and you have them out over by, I'm going to forget now, is it Bank Street? Bank Street, the granite pavers there. They can be set in a permeable setting bed. So instead of mortaring the joints like that, you can have a little bit of space. They could be set on gravel, and then you can invite the water in. So in areas where you want more surface area because the sidewalk itself is tighter, we would then introduce granite sets so that we match the sort of design vocabulary that's going on, but we would set it in a permeable way so that we can still allow water to infiltrate and get to the roots of the trees.
Okay. And then I'm wondering what else about the design kind of captures an attempt to be more climate and flood resilient, given, where we're moving into unknown times. I think in terms of the sheer, we had a storm the other day that dropped, 4 inches of rain? 6 in a very short period of time. So we need to build for those contingencies. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So the modular suspended paving system, we always call it by its brand name, but the modular suspended paving system, that can be expanded. So that's a pretty forward-thinking sustainability measure, because it creates this essentially a void below grade that can hold water, right? So you can imagine, because the soil that you fill that with is called structural soil, so it's almost like a gravelly soil, so there's a lot of voids in it. So there are ways of expanding that. So for example, you can do, and these are all details, but you can do a tree trench, right? So we can actually run those that modular suspending paving system along the curb line to create more of a linear trench that starts to connect the trees together. Obviously, it's all with a cost, and with streetscapes, I think in smaller areas, that's easy to do. On state highways, it's a little bit more difficult because, again, when you're underground, you start hitting utilities and you run into things. But if sustainability is a priority, which it always is, and obviously this detail is beyond a normal tree detail, but if you wanted to take it a step further, that's what we can look at. You can capture runoff in these tree wells if we wanted to design it that way. Absolutely could do that. We've done that plenty, and it's a discussion about how much, where, and the maintenance associated with those kind of things. Right. For example, the bump outs. Right. Like the corner, the perfect place for that type of intervention is here at these corners, right? So you can very easily design that planting bed as an infiltration planter. So we open up the curb and the runoff from the curb line, rather than going directly into an inlet, it could go into that planting bed where it infiltrates. So that's actually a fairly easy one. It's just, it's more of a maintenance thing. So it's a discussion with, with the town about, you have to clean those will collect trash and things like that, so they need to be cleaned and things like that. But that's, if that's a priority, that's something that could easily be accommodated.
Okay, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is, beautiful is important, but I think easily maintained and, cost effective is also really crucial, because I know in the past, sometimes things have been designed and we simply can't really afford to maintain them in the way. So I hope that's something you're always keeping really in the front of your mind.
Yeah, there was 2 points I wanted to make when James was discussing the budget. So one is that's always a key thing that we think about is the long-term maintenance, right? And that's that design quality icon, and so that's why we didn't come in and say, well, this should be pavers, curb to building for the entire length. We pick and choose. We try to be responsible about where we're spending the money. So the corners are a place that's worth the investment, and then mid-block, the concrete, very simple, easy to maintain. That's the idea, and that's we're working with the engineering department on a spec that everyone's comfortable with. So in terms of the budget, one point I wanted to just make was James said, a high end and a low end. And it's really what we presented as the high end is a very responsible mid-range. It's not like, it's not this extravagant finish, right? It's 90% concrete with some highlights using a very nice material. Because it's a historic corridor, we feel like going with a granite, real stone, real material is the right way to go. It's very important. So we were selective, but can you spend less? Of course, you could always spend less. But the design that we put forward is the one that we feel is the most appropriate for this corridor. You can back down from that, but we feel like that is a responsible budget for a corridor that's as important as this one.
Okay, and now I have a tiny question, which is the benches.
Yeah.
Or do they get fixed into place, and that's that, right? They're not.
They get anchored.
You
yes.
can't like pull one up here, pull one up there, because they would
bolted down.
disappear within
Yeah.
a few days, but or an hour. And then once in place, they really couldn't be moved, right?
They could be moved.
Oh, they could be without too much damage.
Yeah,
to...
they're bolted in. They're bolted in, so you can unbolt them, and then you'd cut the bolt off and move it to somewhere else. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not
All right.
that difficult.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
and thanks for the presentation. A lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
Let me run through some thoughts and questions. First, I want to say that's a great presentation, so thanks for all the time and effort that went into that. And of course, as you said, as you get into the details and you move further through the process, that's when you figure out, okay, here was a pretty picture, but can we do it?
That's right.
So, for the trees, whether you do a tree trench or the modular suspended system, you said, do you have any idea of what's under the sidewalk? Because I know, like, for large areas in Nassau Street, the buildings go under the sidewalk for a certain distance, and then you got to wonder about all the pipes and everything else that's how much is under the sidewalk. So do you guys have an idea of, like, how much is there and how realistic trying to use this kind of system might be?
At this point, we know just in speaking with the engineering department, we know generally that there are basements that come out, and there are going to be conflicts. I mean, we do streetscape projects like this in, real urbanized areas that are, that have a slew of things. So it's not something that we're unfamiliar with. So we're fairly confident that how big can it be? How much of an area?
Right.
Generally you want to make it. We want to capture as much as we can, but until we have a survey, and frankly, many times until there's a shovel in the ground,
you're not going to know.
You don't know what's there.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you about the exposed aggregate. I'm a little surprised at that, because I guess you have to put some kind of coating or finish on that to preserve that. And I'm just wondering, maintenance-wise and cost-wise, if it would not just be simpler not to do that?
Yeah, it's just the background on the exposed aggregate finish is, going out there and looking at the tinted concrete that was there, and just getting a feel for it, what it looks like within the character of that corridor, right, which is a historic corridor, and trying to make it blend a little bit better so that there's not this stark contrast. And the exposed, it's something that we've done before, and it's not like the old, it's not done in the same way as like the old school exposed aggregate. This is a treatment is applied to the top of it that you can select how much gradient you want removed, right? So there's a whole range, and for this, we would suggest a lighter touch, right? So it wouldn't be like that sort of like the big pebbles kind of look. It would be more of just a rougher finish that looks a little bit more worn. And in terms of maintenance, it's exposed aggregate is, in our experience and just general practice, it's fine in terms of wear and tear. It's equally as strong as any other kind of concrete. You can seal it, but you also seal regular tinted concrete. So so the sealant is the same, is basically the same. But again, where it's an option, and what we've just in working with the group and walking around and just in these discussions, we realize how important that finish is. It's going to be the majority of the street. When you have 20 to 25 foot wide sidewalks and it's just concrete, that's a big expanse, and that finish and that color has to be right, or it's not going to look right on a historic corridor. So one of the things that we recommended is moving forward, built into the spec for the contractor should be the ability for them to pour large samples for you that you can look at and go out there and say, okay, this is the one we want. And we've done that before. We've done up to 5 or 6, and say, okay, we want one tinted with exposed aggregate, we want one untinted with exposed aggregate, and then let it set on site, and then look at it and make a decision. It's a little more complicated, it's a little more tedious for the contractor, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it in this situation, rather than committing to something and then you don't until you're into it, you don't realize that that's not what you wanted. So that I think that's an approach that we discussed with the group that we would recommend.
Yeah. So I think one problem we've had with the current design and the way the concrete was poured is you have these large expanses of concrete, and then David's store decides they need a new water line because it broke or whatever.
Right.
And there's no defined edge anywhere, so you end up destroying so much of the sidewalk. So is there a thought process, or is there a best practice as far as, how wide do you go with joints, or do something so that further future repairs don't destroy too big an area?
Right, so this has everything to do, and this is the design quality piece. This has everything to do with the way that the sidewalk is detailed and how tight we keep the contractor to that spec, right? So those expansion joints, all of those things, we want to define that for the contractor, not just give them a general spec and say every X feet maximum, and then they put them wherever they want. We want to tell them exactly where those expansion joints go, and that the flag pattern that's up there right there, what that allows you to do if they run a utility, then the ordinance is you have to replace that sidewalk to the nearest saw cut joint, right? Like you can't just replace a random patch. You have to go 1 or 2 joints in either direction and replace that panel. So as opposed to the diamond pattern, that's very difficult to do that with, because it's not running perpendicular, it's obvious. Where this pattern allows you to do that.
All right, let me just breeze through a couple more and then let everybody else ask you questions. The 12-inch granite curving detail, I don't know, seems kind of big, but anyway. The granite band, I'm not a big fan of that, because I just think it's I guess it looks nice day one, but then I worry what it's going to look like down the future, and especially if you put wording in it, and I wonder what you say. And, you know, over time, how meaningful or not is whatever you decide to say there. So anyway, I'd be concerned about the cost of that. And I realized you gave us the two estimates, and you said, hey, here's things you could pop out. The buffer width, I saw measurements on, here's traffic lane, here's the first buffer, then there's bike lanes and there's a measurement, but there was no measurement for the buffer between the bike lane and the sidewalk, and there was no measurement for the sidewalk. So I didn't want to assume what those were, but did you guys have a thought as to what they might be?
Oh, I see what you're saying, because of the buffer, right, so the buffer is the same as the sidewalk detail is the same as the sidewalk. In the sidewalk design, so that's why we didn't label that, but the buffer is what, 6 feet? Yeah, because those are, the tree pits are 6 by 6, right? So the buffer is 6 feet, and then the sidewalk width varies, right? It varies from
It varies a lot.
whatever, 15 to 19 feet from the buffer to the building, whatever that is existing. So
Okay.
the sidewalk width doesn't change from what it is today, from curb to building.
Okay. And then I just like to, I think David might have mentioned, there are turn lanes. And then I think, so there's turn lanes at Palmer Square, there's a turn lane onto John Street, there's a turn lane onto Chambers Street. I'm not sure how we would ever do away with those. I think the greatest possibility of having the bike lane where you remove a lane is actually from Van Deventer to Witherspoon, because the south side of the street has 2 lanes. And you could take a lane away.
Right.
But I worry about the rest of that area. I don't know how realistic that might actually be. But again, it's a detail, and you guys would have to look at it.
Yeah, there's no way to know that without a traffic study.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Great.
All right, sorry to take a, Mia?
First of all, I can't remember if it was Isaac who recommended to Michelle or Michelle who brought you in. And so both Isaac and Michelle, I'm just so glad this has been what we lacked before in addressing the Nassau streetscape. And this is, it's amazing. It's really like a dream come true. It seems like we've been nibbling around the edges, and we didn't really, this is really, I think, what a lot of people had hoped for. And as I said, I think if we're talking about, $1 million here or there for like an amazing project, or just well, I'm just thinking about the small swaths of streets throughout the town where there are millions spent and you don't actually even see anything because it's all underneath the ground. At least here we're getting something that's aesthetically pleasing. Also, I just want to say, to that point, Mark, this is one of, if not the most historically significant intersections in the state, and I'm not sure that we want to value engineer it. If there's any place that we would pull out all the stops, it would be this corner. I hope that we can, since we share this historic intersection with the university, I hope we can, talk with them about their interest also in this corner. So, yeah, I love the clean lines of the concrete. I just, let's see, I had a few notes. The bike lanes, the context of that, I think, is, has to be discussed, and Deanna will guide you, but, there are numerous bike lane discussions happening in different committees, and including discussions with the university that we've had in traffic safety about their interest in that area. So hopefully, this may actually replace some other bike lanes that there was interest in creating. It wouldn't make sense to do both on some parallel roadways, which may or may not make other people happy. But at any rate, I think it would not be both. It would be an either or. Right. So the cost would be considered in that framework. I just someone called me before the meeting who looked at the presentation and said, but are you creating a bike lane to nowhere? Because, once you get to a certain point, you can't continue it. And I know it's beyond the scope of what what you've been asked to do now, but I assume at some point you'll look at that connectivity. But to that person and to that point, which I'm sure other people would ask, I think what their one thing that we've been trying for many years to accomplish is to have a core, safe network, bicycle network infrastructure in our core, in particular for kids and seniors and people who are not super confident riders, just so people, in particular kids can get from school to the library to town. And, so this definitely, even though you might not be able to go farther in, particularly down towards Princeton Kingston Road, but at least it would accomplish that, a big chunk of that core network, and it might ultimately be more cost efficient than some of the parallel proposals for bike lanes, but that will be for you and staff to sort all that out and come back to us with the comparisons. So, yeah.
Okay. Leticia?
I would just don't have any additional questions that haven't already been made or comments, except to say that I echo my colleagues' comments on this. Really was a great presentation. Can totally visualize what it could look like, and hope to be around to see that.
Thank you. Leighton?
Just want to say well done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Michelle?
So thank you. It's been a great process, great working with you. And this has been very, very good tonight, very informative. I wanted to comment on a couple of things. So one is, when we've talked about Nassau Streetscape and the capital budget, the projections, we had in there about $5 to $6 million. So I was relieved because when I saw this at first, I saw the granite and all the, beautiful tree wells and everything, and I just got really nervous. So I'm actually relieved that it's, in the same realm of what we talked about. We don't want to go down the road again of having to redo anything, and that happens when you try and, and save. This is our brand. This is our main corridor. So, I think whatever we can do to try and get, additional grant money or whatever, but I'm all for, moving forward on the top end, or this middle end, as you said. But it's granite, it's rich looking, it will last a long time. This isn't something we want to continually redo. And you've addressed a lot of the issues with maintenance. We did talk a lot about doing the diagonal, which is there now. But, I've been convinced that the beauty of the flag is very nice, and it seems a lot more practical. So, I'm really convinced on all these elements. I think what we're talking about here is kind of bifurcating this process, moving, I think, forward with the actual sidewalk piece, but we have other work to do in terms of bike lanes that feed in, and working with NGO DOT and doing all of the traffic studies. I'm not necessarily convinced that it has to be 10 feet plus 3 feet, and that it has to take all that room. Looking at other bike lanes in other places, you have two-way cycle tracks that are not necessarily 10 feet wide with that much of a buffer. But these are all things, I think, not for tonight, but they're things that I'd love to see us move forward with investigating this and seeing if we can do that, but not holding up the process on the sidewalk. I think that the process could be doing, and I defer to Deanna, but doing these in two tranches, moving forward with the sidewalk enhancements and then working on this. And I wanted just to comment to David's point earlier, and maybe it's the way it was presented, that it really only would help the university students, which isn't a bad thing. I'd like to get the scooters and all that off of the sidewalks, so this is a huge help in terms of pedestrian safety, bike safety, but also having these other feeder corridors coming from the schools, and just bringing people across town. It works for me, for where I live, so not just from a personal standpoint, but bringing people to the commercial sector is really an economic driver, and I really do believe it would be transformative if we can do it without disrupting parking or turning lanes and so on. So let's see what we can do. But thank you so much.
So let me ask, between you and our engineer, the way this contract is written, I'm just curious as to what the next steps are contractually. And because I want to make sure we don't get, I don't want you guys to get in a bind where you get too far ahead, because it's not like there was a great gushing of, yep, we all agreed here's exactly one thing to do. Instead, there were a lot of questions and comments. So I just want to make sure that we protect you and us and agree as to how we're going to move forward, and there's enough back and forth between enough people that we don't run into big cost overruns and redoing work that we really shouldn't be doing 2 or 3 or 4 times.
So we're at the point now where Arterial has presented these concept ideas. That was the intention of the original contract. So I think we're at the point where council says, thank you very much. We accept the general product that you have provided. Now give us a proposal for the next phase to go in and refine these ideas, you know, do the due diligence with DOT or whatever we may need to do to start moving ahead towards preliminary engineering. I think that's where we're at this point.
Okay, so when that comes back, then I guess it'll be much more specific about what the design goal is, because we were all over the place. So we were in between $550,000 a block to $750,000 a block. We didn't come down on one or the other or in between. The bike idea is still hanging out there in space with no cost estimate. So anyway, it'll just be interesting when this proposal comes back to how it's worded. And then
I just want to put in a vote. I mean, I wanted to respond a little to what Mia was saying about sort of bike facilities on one of the other of these parallel routes, one being Hamilton-Wiggins, obviously, and the other being Nassau. And I think that the problem with Nassau, first of all, I was really excited before this process started to think that Nassau had the potential to have bike facilities without sacrificing anything. Mm-hmm. And what I've discovered is that's not the case. I thought, oh man, there's so much real estate, we can do it all. If that's not true, I think that Hamilton-Wiggins has a lot more potential because it automatically connects to much more of the community. It's easy to extend, all the way into the Littlebrook neighborhood. It's easy to extend into the western section and beyond, Rosedale. And so I just think that that's my first reaction. But I would like to, we have a PBAC meeting in the beginning of August, and I would like to get input. That's our Pedestrian Bike Advisory Committee, and I think they really do have their pulse on sort of the biking community in town, and would be helpful to run that question by them.
Yeah, we're also tasked to look at the master plan and give feedback to the consultant as to the bike element or the mobility element, which includes the proposed bike facilities, and see if things have changed since that plan was adopted back in 2017. So I think that would be a separate discussion that we can continue in a few different forums. But in terms of Arterial's contract, I think we do need to sit down with DOT and go through all of these ideas. Fortuitously, I actually got an email as we were sitting here from the Office of Bike and Pedestrian Mobility at DOT, and they're already aware of what we're doing here in Princeton. They've seen the articles about it today, so that opens the door for us to go and have those conversations. And I think at that point, again, it's going to be more of refining a design, and at that point, we can come back with more information about that cycle track, the pros and cons, and from your perspective on Nassau Street, and then this other work on the internal side with our committees for looking at corridors in general. This one as well as the Hamilton, Wiggins, Robeson, Hodge. So.
Okay. Mia and then Michelle, and then Eve.
Yeah, so I don't want this whole project to be subsumed in a discussion of bike lanes and bike lane viability, because that has basically tanked many projects in the last 20 years. And this is really important, the streetscape. And my sense, and maybe I misunderstood, but at the beginning I thought you indicated that sort of the bike lane exploration was something, it was an add-on more towards the end. It wasn't part of your original. So is there some way we can sort of separate that out and focus on the core of what you had originally been tasked with, and the next step being to come back to us with some specific pricing? So I think my sense tonight was that there was definitely, Mark, you said there was no gushing. I heard some gushing, but I think
Gushing is in a final, everybody on one place, but yeah, go ahead.
I didn't hear anyone saying, no, we don't like this, do something different. I think there was a positive reaction for us, as positive as we ever get about anything. This was pretty far on the spectrum of being positive. So it's just, I didn't hear anyone say, I don't like this concept, go back to the drawing board and come back with something totally different. I think everyone likes this. It's just a matter of what is the price pain point that we're, willing. And so I think, to my mind, the next step would be to just come back with us with more specifics about, like, with visuals, like here's what it would look like for this much money. Here's what it would look like for that much money. Some of the questions about durability and, all of that stuff, we might need a little that fleshed out a bit. And then sort of partition off, like, it's going to take you a while, communication with DOT, with Midsummer, with our Bike and Pedestrian Committee. Like, we should not let this hold up progress on the, I just have one question. Prices are particularly, we certainly are aware of this from we have a lot of other construction going on, and I know that the materials and, we're still experiencing supply chain increases and their interest rate and all that. Is it conceivable that, by the time, when you come back, it would be helpful to have a time frame for implementation so that we could, I think there's a good chance that prices may start to come down in that area. And so be helpful to get your sense of that as well, like what the time frame is, so we could gauge whether some of the prices may have come down. So
I might be able to just help for 1 second. So the budget that we presented tonight is what we call an order of magnitude budget. So that it's based on a typical block, and then we expand that the length of the road, and so we put a 20% contingency on it, and we say it'll be somewhere in this range. The very next step is schematic design, which is taking this design and applying it to the full corridor and doing an accurate takeoff, a realistic, accurate takeoff. Within that, there's a range that so like the things that the mayor was mentioning about, there's this high, middle, these different types of finishes. That's tweaking a number. It doesn't necessarily affect the design. It's very easy to say, okay, well, if instead of exposed aggregate, it was just tinted, then it would cost this much. And those are just little variables within the budget. But the very next step is schematic design for the full corridor, and that you can have a conversation with DOT about, that you can establish a budget with, et cetera.
So if I can just re-ask the question I think Mia was wanting to ask is, can you continue with the schematic design on the sidewalks and not preclude doing the bike track if we decide this is the right place for it? Or if you're proceeding with the schematic design, you have to know yes, bike track or no bike track?
You can proceed with the sidewalk, right? You can always build on the most, if you knew now that you were going to implement the bike lanes, the most cost-effective way of doing it is to do it all at one time. That being said, you can construct the sidewalk and then decide on a bike lane afterwards. It changes the way that it's constructed. It changes some things about it, but you can proceed that way as well. You know, and because like you're saying, you know, if the bike lane discussion is a 2 or 3 or whatever, how many year discussion to come to a conclusion between studies and DOT and all of that, you know, I think you have to make the decision. Do you want that to hold up the sidewalk? So the short answer is yes, you can construct the sidewalk and then figure out, that's done plenty of times. There's many times where you add a bike lane where you're not touching the sidewalk. So you can do it. But like I said, obviously the most cost-effective way at any time is to do everything at one time. But yeah, so does that is that?
Yeah, I mean,
that's
am
not
I
a
right,
yes or
Mia?
no.
Is that what you sort of wanted to know?
Yeah, that's not as. It's not as reassuring as I had hoped, you know. Yeah, but I think just have to take it one step at a time. That's fortuitous. You've just had some outreach. Maybe you can just get an initial feel from the state about, you know, what the timing would be, and
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of hoping too that we could, I know we talked about it before, but I was kind of hoping we could just move forward. I mean, it sounds like the $750 a block times 7 is 5.25 million. I mean, that's within the range of what we had in our capital budget. So, I mean, I was hoping that if everyone liked it, we could have a consensus at least to go ahead with schematics there. And then, Deanna, I don't know, what is our time frame with needing that done? How much window do we have to play to get a traffic study and a little bit more information on the bike lane piece? Did we have a few months, or?
I would say no.
If you wanted to go like Witherspoon Phase 1, that we have a few more months.
Right, exactly. If you want a 16 or
Right.
26-month design period, then we've got time. But if we want to turn it around to construction next year,
we don't have time.
We don't
Yeah.
have a lot of time.
If you want construction on Nassau Street next year, you need to start now on the sidewalk design by itself. That's the short answer.
Okay, and yeah, I mean, we do, I mean, we have anticipated it in capital expenses. So I guess that's kind of the answer. It would have to be in 2 parts. And just to respond, I mean, I never thought that it was an either-or situation. I mean, you know, I think that by this two-way cycle track on Nassau Street serves a very different purpose than a bike lane on Hamilton. I don't see one replacing the other. So in an ideal scenario, we'd be able to do both. But that's my take.
money, that's the only issue.
On the bike lane, I think I'm with David that it's either or. I don't see the point of doing that. We've been wrestling with Hamilton for a long time. I guess I'd like to know, you mentioned there's, you know, some substantial cost implications of not doing this as one project. Are we talking an additional 20%? No ballpark figure.
Not without. I mean, we don't have a design for the sidewalk yet. We never mind a design for the bike lane. You know, it's
right. Okay.
Can't really get.
Because, I mean, maybe I'm missing something. I mean, is there, this is not the question I was going to ask, I had a totally different question, but is there an imperative to move forward in '24 as opposed to like waiting a year and having these questions answered? I mean, is it just that, questions never get answered and then we don't do anything? Or is there a specific, like, do we have a grant, a match grant? Or, sorry, Michelle, I know this is not the question you want to, I'm just curious.
You've seen what Nassau Street looks like. It's, it's
Right.
really, there's empty wells, there's cracked sidewalks. It's really in bad shape. So,
Yeah. Okay.
That's my answer to that.
Okay.
The other impact, Deanna, I think impacts all the projects you have lined up, and and it also is going to impact the budget, because, I mean, to what degree?
Yeah.
If it's put
Okay.
off for a year, what's the delta, blah, blah, blah.
Correct.
So,
Okay.
oh, yes, go.
My other question had to do with the timeline that is in your project, which is, here we are, July, it says town council presentation. Then it says September, which it feels like tomorrow to me, and I'm sure it feels like tomorrow to you, for final schematic design. But then Deanna's saying we are at the end of the contract, so could somebody just jive those two pieces of information?
I'm not sure if was that schematic design intended to be the end of this contract?
Yeah, so that's really.
Right, so that's not, so that September date was really the finishing this product, which
Okay.
is not truly a schematic design, so.
Okay,
that's a-
so we are, okay, so
Yeah.
okay.
So schematic design for a corridor like this takes, once you have a survey in hand, could take 3 to 4 months.
Okay,
So it's basically finishing this, right? And then at that point, with survey in hand, we apply this design to the full length of the corridor, looking at all the nooks and crannies and everything underground and all of those things, and come to a budget. Right?
okay. And just, I know I said this before, but just, again, in counting on engineering and you as well to represent on that, resiliency in the face of changing climate. I mean, it can look beautiful, and if it gets destroyed in a flood, I was just in Vermont for a week, and, of course, I went up to hike during the week that there were those tremendous storms, and just seeing, the damage that the roads took, it's very sobering. And, so I think it seems to me like just has to be a really high priority, given in New Jersey, I think we are the #1 state for intensified rainfall of any state in the country, and it's just not something we can afford to ignore in a project we're spending millions of dollars on, so,
Understood.
thanks.
Okay. All right, because I do want to move on to other things. Go ahead.
On a bright note, I just want to, for all of us, say it really seemed like we would never get through all those meetings about the Witherspoon design. And then if we ever got through the meetings and the decisions, that it would never actually happen. And now we're just finishing it up. So that's really encouraging. But to that point, I want to tell you how grateful I am that you created these simulations, because we looked at so many drawings, and it was made more difficult because we were on Zoom for Witherspoon Street. It was really challenging for us to even understand the implications of the decisions we were making, because the drawings were so intricate, and it was hard to envision what the end result would be, and this just makes it so much easier. It's really, really helpful. Thank you so much. So.
All right, so I'm going to assume we have no more questions. We've asked almost everything we can think of. Was there anything else you wanted to tell us that we didn't ask you? The correct answer is no.
We're good.
All right, thank you so much for all your time this evening. Thanks for waiting, and we appreciate
Thank
the
you.
presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Okay, next up is a public hearing, ordinance number 2023-24, an ordinance pursuant to the New Jersey Local Lands and Building Law, NJSA 40A 12-3, accepting the dedication of a permanent pedestrian easement on Block 27.04, lots 23 and 76, Municipality of Princeton tax map between Van Deventer Avenue and Lincoln Court. Is it David's the motion? And is there a second? Michelle's got the second. Okay, great. Any council questions, comments? David?
Yeah, I just had a really minor question about wording that I had emailed Trishka about. She wanted to check in with Ed Schmier. Did you hear back from Ed about the wording in the easement?
No, I wasn't expecting to because he was probably out at a meeting by the time he saw my email. So
okay.
We'll see what he says tomorrow.
All right, no worries. It's really minor, so.
Okay. Any other council questions or comments? Any public questions or comments, either in the room or on Zoom? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and it's a roll call vote.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have two ordinance introductions. Ordinance 2023-25, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating abandoned bicycles and amending Chapter 22 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Public hearing August 14th, 2023. Is there thank you, Leticia. David's got the second. Any questions or comments? Oh, there shouldn't be. It's an introduction. Never mind. Roll call vote. My bad.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 2023-26, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating towing service fees and amending Chapter 11A of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Public hearing August 14th, 2023. Is there a motion on that? Thank you. Eve's got the motion. David's got the second. Roll call vote.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Newland?
Okay, next up are resolutions, and depending which version of the agenda you're looking at, if your version has as number one, Resolution 23-242, that's the one at the beginning of the meeting we said we would not do tonight because we have to wait till the ordinance we just introduced is actually passed. So 23-243, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton appointing Raina Harris as the municipal clerk. Is there a, Leticia, thank you, has got the motion, Michelle's got the second. Questions or comments? Okay, very good. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
23-244, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the award of a contract to Hellas Construction, Inc., using the Educational Services Commission of New Jersey, number 65 MCES-CCPS Co-op, contract number ESCNJ/AEPA-21A, of course, for removal and disposal of existing luminaries and installation of new Musco LED sports lighting at Hilltop Park Ball Field in the amount of $261,772. Michelle has the motion, and Layton's got the second. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
23-245, resolution of the Mayor and Council of Princeton authorizing the termination of 2023 professional services agreement for supplemental public health nursing with Linda Lee, RN. Is there a motion? Thank you, David. Michelle's got the second. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda has one item authorizing the payment of bills and claims. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Michelle. Is there a second? Thank you, Mia. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
David,
I move to adjourn.
is there a second? Thank you, Leighton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're done. Thank you all for hanging out and sticking it out.